The air in my new home was wrong, heavy with a silence that clung to my skin like damp cloth. I'd just moved to a small house on the edge of town, a place swallowed by a forest of gnarled oaks and pines so thick they blocked out the world. The nearest road was a faint memory, 20 minutes away, but it felt like I'd stepped into a void where time and sound didn't exist. The house was old, its wooden walls stained by years of neglect, the windows small and cloudy, barely letting. In the fading light of late autumn, I wanted peace, a fresh start. But as I stood in the empty living room surrounded by unpacked boxes, a chill settled in my bones. This place doesn't want me here. It was my first evening, the sky outside bruised with purples and grays, when the knock came. Soft at first, almost hesitant, it cut through the stillness like a blade. I froze, a box of dishes half unpacked in my hands, my pulse quickening. Who could find this place? The house was hidden, tucked away behind a wall of trees, invisible to anyone who didn't know it was here. I set the box down, my footsteps echoing on the creaky floorboards as I approached the door. Through the thin, yellowed curtains I saw a shadow, tall, unmoving, too close. My hand hesitated on the knob, but curiosity won. I opened the door. He stood there, an older man, maybe 50, his long gray hair greasy and tangled falling past, his shoulders like a shroud. His eyes were sunken, dark hollows that seemed to swallow the dim porch light. His skin was pale, almost translucent, stretched tight over sharp cheekbones. He wore a faded jacket, too thin for the biting cold, and his hands hung lifeless at his sides. "Evening," he said, his voice low, mechanical, like he was reciting words he didn't mean. "Something's not right." I forced a smile, my skin crawling, and asked if I could help him. He mumbled something about welcoming me to the area, but his words were disjointed, his face blank, devoid of warmth. His eyes never left mine, unblinking, like they were peeling me apart. I nodded, muttered something about being busy, and closed the door, my hands trembling as I turned the lock. "He's just a neighbor. That's all." But he wasn't. The next morning, as I unpacked in the dim light, filtering through the trees, the knock came again. Slower this time, deliberate, each rap like a heartbeat in the quiet house. My stomach twisted. I crept to the window, peering through the curtains. It's him. Same jacket, same greasy hair, same dead expression. He hadn't changed clothes, as if he'd been standing outside all night, frozen in time. I opened the door, keeping the chain on, my voice sharper than I meant. "What do you want?" He tilted his head, his lips curling into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Just seeing how you're settling in," he said, his voice a low hum that seemed to vibrate in my chest. He's lying. His questions were vague, about the house, the land, the trees, but they felt hollow, like he was stalling, waiting for something. I tried to keep up the small talk, my heart pounding, but his gaze never wavered, those sunken eyes drilling into me. "He doesn't belong here." I cut the conversation short, saying I had work to do, and shut the door, my breath shallow. I stood there listening, expecting him to leave. He didn't. His shadow lingered behind the curtains, a dark smudge against the glass. Why won't he go? I backed away, my hands clammy, and tried to focus on unpacking, but the house felt smaller now, the walls closing in, the air thick with something I couldn't name. Hours passed, the sun sinking lower, casting long shadows. Through the windows, I was sorting books, trying to shake the unease, when the knock came again. Not again. This time it was different, loud, demanding, each strike shaking the door in its frame. My heart leapt into my throat. I edged toward the hallway, my eyes locked on the door. The curtains fluttered, and there he was, his shadow larger now, pressing against the glass. "Just leave," I shouted, my voice cracking. "I'm busy. Go away." Silence. Then another knock, slower, heavier, like he was daring me to open. The door. He's testing me. Anger flared, hot and reckless, drowning out the fear. I stormed to the door, my hands shaking with adrenaline. "I'll make him leave." I flung the door open and he was there, closer than before, barely a foot away. His face was a mask of stillness, his eyes black pits that seemed to pull me in. His body was tense, every muscle coiled like a predator about to strike. He's not human. My gaze dropped and I saw it, a glint of metal peeking from the sleeve of his jacket. A knife, its blade catching the faint light, cold and sharp and real. He's here to kill me. Time froze, the world shrinking to that single point of steel. I slammed the door shut, my hands fumbling with the lock as he lunged forward, his weight crashing against the wood. The door rattled, the sound echoing through my skull. He didn't speak, didn't scream, just kept pounding. Each blow deliberate, relentless, like he was carving his way in. He's going to get inside. I stumbled back, my heart hammering so hard I thought it would burst. I grabbed my phone, my fingers barely able to dial 911. "There's a man at my door," I whispered to the operator, my voice trembling. "He has a knife, please come now." I ran through the house, checking every window, every lock, my mind racing with images of him breaking through, his knife flashing in the dark. What does he want? Why me? The pounding stopped, sudden and jarring, leaving a silence that was somehow worse. I crept back to the door, my breath shallow, and peered through the curtains. The porch was empty, the night still, as if he'd never been there. But I knew he had. I could still feel his eyes, those hollow voids, watching me. The police arrived, too late, their flashlight sweeping the empty yard. I told them everything. The gray hair, the knife, the way he stood too close. They searched the area, questioned neighbors. No one had seen him. No one matching his description lived anywhere near. He doesn't exist. Days turned into weeks, but the house was no longer mine. Every shadow felt alive, every rustle of the trees outside a whisper of his return. I started sleeping with a kitchen knife under my pillow, checking the locks 3 times before bed. He's still out there. At night I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying that moment at the door, the glint of the knife, the deadness in his eyes. What was he? I told myself he was gone, that he'd moved on to some other place, some other victim. But I wasn't sure. The house felt like a trap now, its silence a lie, hiding something darker. One night, weeks later, I woke with a start, my heart racing. The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like it's holding its breath. I got up, unable to shake the feeling that something was wrong. I checked the locks, my hands trembling, my eyes darting to every corner. As I passed the living room, I froze. There on the coffee table was a crumpled piece of paper that hadn't been there before. My hands shook as I picked it up. Scrawled in jagged, uneven letters were 2 words. I'm waiting. I don't know how it got there. The doors were locked, the windows sealed. I burned the note that night, watching the flames consume the words until they were ash. But it didn't help. I still feel him. Every shadow, every flicker of movement in the trees. It's him. He's watching, waiting for me to let my guard down. I don't know who he was or what he wanted, but I know one thing. This house, my supposed sanctuary, will never be safe again. Weeks after the note, I started noticing things, small, subtle signs that kept me awake at night. A scratch on the back door, too deep to be from a branch. Footprints in the mud outside leading into the trees but never back. Once I swore I saw a figure standing at the edge of the forest, just beyond the reach of the porch light, his silhouette blending with the shadows. I stopped going outside after dark, stopped opening the curtains. The house became a prison, its walls closing in, the air thick with dread. He's not gone. He never was. I thought about moving, leaving this cursed place behind. But something kept me here. A sick need to know who he was, why he chose me. I started digging, asking questions, searching old records for any trace of a man with long gray hair and sunken eyes. Nothing. The neighbors, few as they were, had no answers. One old woman living a mile away mentioned a story from decades ago, a drifter who wandered these woods, never staying long, always watching. She didn't know his name, only that people felt uneasy around him, like he carried death in his shadow. Is that him? The more I thought about it, the less it made sense. His face, his voice, the way he moved. It was all wrong, like he was wearing a human skin that didn't fit. I started dreaming about him. Nightmares where he stood at my door, his knife gleaming, his eyes blacker than the night. In the dreams, he never spoke, but I could feel his thoughts, cold and sharp, slicing into me. You can't escape. I'd wake up gasping, the room too dark, the silence too loud. I stopped sleeping, stopped eating. My life unraveling in this house that was supposed to be my refuge. One night, unable to bear the silence, I sat in the living room, a flashlight in one hand, the kitchen knife in the other. The wind howled outside, the trees scratching at the windows like fingers. I kept my eyes on the door, waiting, expecting him to return. Hours passed, the night stretching on, endless. Then, just as I started to drift into a restless doze, I heard it. A soft tap at the door. Not loud, not demanding, but deliberate, like a promise. He's back. My heart stopped. I gripped the knife, my hands slick with sweat, and crept to the window. The curtains were drawn, but I could see his shadow, tall and still, waiting. He's always been waiting. I didn't open the door. I didn't call the police. I just sat there frozen, the knife trembling in my hand, listening to the taps grow softer, then stop. When I finally worked up the courage to look outside, he was gone. But on the porch, carved into the wood, was a single word. Soon. I don't know if he's human or something else, something older, something tied to this house, this land. I don't know if he's still out there, watching from the trees, or if he's already inside, hidden in the shadows I can't see. All I know is that every night I lock the doors, check the windows, and pray he doesn't come back. But deep down I know he will. He's waiting, and I'm running out of time. The air was thick with the promise of safety, a new home, a fresh start, until that note appeared, taped to our door like a whisper from the void. Welcome to the neighborhood. No name, no warmth, just sharp, jagged handwriting that seemed to claw at my chest. My name is Jonathan, and I was 22, fresh out of college, standing in a living room cluttered with unpacked boxes, believing Aaron and I had found our sanctuary. We were wrong. That note wasn't a greeting. It was a warning. A shadow cast long before the woman appeared, her eyes burning with a hunger I couldn't name. This is the story of how our haven turned into a nightmare, where every creak of the floorboards felt like a heartbeat, and the darkness hid something far worse than silence. The house was modest, tucked in a quiet suburb where the streets curled like sleepy snakes under dim streetlights. Aaron and I had scraped together every penny to afford it, a steal compared to the cramped apartments nearby. We were thrilled, young, naive, dreaming of late-night pizza runs and lazy Sundays. The first day, we hauled our lives in. Cardboard, boxes stuffed with clothes, books, and mismatched dreams. Aaron, ever the optimist, blasted music while we arranged furniture, laughing about how we'd finally made it. But then, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in bruises of purple and gray, I found the note. It was taped to the door handle, a simple card, unassuming, yet the words scratched at my mind. Welcome to the neighborhood. No signature, no trace of who left it. I showed it to Aaron, expecting a joke about nosy neighbors, but his smile faltered, his eyes lingering on the jagged script. Weird, he muttered, tossing it onto the counter. I tried to shrug it off, but it felt like a splinter under my skin, impossible to ignore. Days passed and we settled into a rhythm. I worked late shifts at a pizza shop, the smell of dough and grease clinging to my clothes, while Aaron clocked out early from his office job. The house began to feel like ours, its creaky floors and chipped paint endearing rather than flawed. But the note stayed with me, a quiet hum in the back of my mind, like a melody you can't unhear. What kind of neighbor leaves a note like that? I wondered, staring at it late at night when the house was still, and the world outside seemed to hold its breath. It was as if the note was watching me, waiting for something to unfold. It was a Tuesday night when I first saw her. I'd just pulled into the driveway, exhausted, my headlights cutting through the dark like a blade. The air was heavy, the kind of quiet that presses against your eardrums. As I stepped out, my eyes caught a flicker of movement near the house. There, by the front window, stood a woman. She was still, her silhouette sharp against the glow of the streetlight, her face obscured by shadow. She wasn't moving, just staring into our home, her posture rigid, predatory. My heart stuttered, a cold sweat prickling my skin. Who stands, like that, motionless, watching a stranger's house? I fumbled with my keys, my breath shallow, and walked toward the garage. When I glanced back, she was gone, swallowed by the night. I told myself it was nothing, a neighbor, a passerby, but my pulse raced, betraying the lie. Inside, I told Aaron, trying to laugh it off. Probably just some weirdo, he said, but his eyes darted to the window and I knew he felt it too, the unease, the sense that something had shifted. The next week blurred by, each day a step toward normalcy. We bought a couch from IKEA, hung a cheap painting on the wall, tried to make the house ours. But the memory of the woman lingered, a ghost in my thoughts. I'd catch myself staring out the window at night, expecting to see her again, her eyes boring into me. What did she want? The question gnawed at me, a quiet dread that grew with each passing day. Aaron noticed my unease, teasing me about being paranoid, but I saw the way he double-checked the locks before bed. The house, once a symbol of freedom, now felt like a stage, and we were actors in a play we didn't understand. Then came the night that broke everything. It was a Friday, the air thick with the promise of a quiet weekend. I'd worked until 10, my body aching from hours on my feet. The drive home was a blur, the streets empty, the world cloaked in a silence that felt too heavy, too deliberate. As I turned onto our street, my headlights swept across the house and my stomach dropped. The front door was wide open, a black maw in the moonlight. The lights inside were off, the house swallowed by darkness. My mind raced. Aaron was supposed to be home. I parked, my hands trembling as I grabbed my phone. "Aaron?" I called from the porch, my voice thin, swallowed by the night. No answer. The silence was deafening, a living thing that pressed against me, urging me to run. But I couldn't leave him. I stepped inside, the air cold, stale, like the house was holding its breath. The living room was empty, the furniture looming like silent witnesses. My phone's flashlight cast jagged shadows, each one a threat. "Aaron, why's the door open?" I called again, louder, my voice cracking. Nothing. Then, a faint glow caught my eye. Aaron's phone, abandoned on the kitchen counter, its screen lighting up as my text buzzed through. My blood ran cold. Aaron never went anywhere without his phone. He was obsessive about it, always checking notifications, always connected. If his phone was here, where was he? The realization hit me like a punch. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. I moved toward the stairs, each step deliberate, my heart pounding so loud I thought it would betray me. The house felt alive, its walls watching, its shadows shifting. What if she's here? The thought clawed at me. The image of the woman's silhouette burned into my mind. I reached the top of the stairs, the hallway stretching before me like a tunnel. Aaron's bedroom door was ajar, a sliver of darkness spilling out. I pushed it open, my flashlight trembling in my hand. The room was empty, or so I thought. Then a voice, low and urgent, from the closet. "Jonathan?" It was Aaron, his face pale, his eyes wide with terror. He was crouched behind a crack in the door, his body tense like an animal cornered. "Did you see someone?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. My mind reeled. See someone? I hadn't seen anyone. But the open door, the abandoned phone, it all screamed danger. Before I could answer, he grabbed my arm, pulling me into the closet. "Call 911, he said, his voice shaking. "She's in the house." My fingers fumbled with my phone, the screen blurring as panic took hold. She? The woman? The pieces fell together, each one a shard of glass in my chest. I dialed, my voice low as I whispered to the operator, my eyes locked on the door. The house was silent, but it wasn't empty. I could feel her presence, a weight in the air, a shadow waiting to strike. Minutes stretched into eternity, each second a battle against the urge to scream, to run. Then footsteps, heavy, deliberate, echoing through the house. They were fast, a sprint toward the front door. Aaron's grip tightened on my arm, his breath ragged. The operator's voice was a lifeline, urging us to stay hidden, stay quiet. But what if she comes back? The thought was a loop, a trance pulling me deeper into fear. The footsteps stopped, replaced by the distant wail of sirens. Relief flooded me, but it was fleeting. The police stormed in, their flashlights cutting through the dark. They found her, a woman, her eyes wild, her face twisted with rage, trying to flee. They caught her before she could escape, her screams echoing as they cuffed her. Aaron told me everything as we sat in the living room, the police lights flashing outside. He'd come home early, tossed his phone on the counter and gone upstairs to change. Then a crash at the front door, footsteps prowling below. He'd hidden in the closet, helpless without his phone, listening as she moved through the house, turning off every light, plunging it into darkness. She'd lingered at the back, waiting as if she knew someone was home, waiting for me. The thought made my skin crawl. The police said she wasn't there to rob us. Her eyes, her rage, they spoke of something darker, something personal. But why us? The note, the woman, the open door, they were pieces of a puzzle we'd never solve. We didn't stay in that house. When the lease ended, we packed up and left, the note still taped to the fridge in my mind, its words a haunting echo. Welcome to the neighborhood. Every shadow now feels like her, every creak a reminder that safety is an illusion. I see her eyes in my dreams, restless, raging, watching from the dark, and I wonder, will she find us again? The air was heavy, like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to shatter the silence. I had just uprooted my life, trading the chaos of the city for a quiet corner of a nowhere town, chasing a job that promised to change everything. The house I rented, a small creaking relic on a forgotten street, stood alone under the dim glow of a single street lamp. Its wooden bones groaned under the weight of years, and the air inside smelled of dust and secrets. Something about this place felt wrong, like the walls were watching me. I ignored it, chalking it up to the exhaustion of the move, but deep down, a whisper in my gut told me to stay alert. That first night, as I drove into town under a sky bruised with clouds, the streets were empty, the shops shuttered, their windows dark as hollow eyes. It wasn't just quiet, it was abandoned, like the world had turned its back on this place. I had only visited this town once before, for a job interview that felt like a lifeline. The offer came quickly, a golden ticket to a new start, but it meant leaving everything behind. I found the house online, a cheap rental that seemed too good to be true. 1 year, I told myself, just 1 year, and I could move on if it didn't work out. The drive to the house was long, my truck loaded with the bare essentials, everything else sold to lighten the load. By the time I pulled into the gravel driveway, it was past 9 p.m., and the town felt like it had slipped into a dreamless sleep. The streetlights flickered, casting long, wavering shadows that seemed to move when I wasn't looking. I should have turned back then, but something pulled me forward, like the house was waiting for me. Inside, the house was exactly what I expected, old, worn, and heavy with the scent of neglect. The floorboards sighed under my weight, each step echoing in the empty space. The layout was simple. A kitchen bleeding into a living room, a narrow hallway stretching toward 2 bedrooms. I carried my air mattress to the master bedroom, the pump humming as it filled the silence. I was bone-tired, the kind of exhaustion that sinks into your marrow. But as I sat on the floor, waiting for the mattress to inflate, a sound cut through the quiet. A single deliberate creak from the living room, sharp and distinct, like a foot pressing too carefully on the floor. My heart stuttered, and for a moment, I couldn't move. It could have been a raccoon, I told myself, or maybe the house settling. Old places like this had their own voices, didn't they? I forced myself to stand, my legs heavy as I moved down the hallway. The living room was dark, the shadows pooling in corners like spilled ink. I didn't bother with the lights, afraid of what they might reveal. My eyes scanned the room, empty just as I'd left it. No signs of anything living, no scratches or droppings. But the air felt different now, thicker, like someone had been here, breathing the same space. I shook it off, blaming the long drive, the stress of starting over. I wasn't used to this kind of quiet, the kind that presses against your eardrums until you hear things that aren't there. Back in the bedroom, the mattress was full, sagging slightly under my weight as I threw a blanket over it. I lay down, staring at the ceiling, willing sleep to come. Tomorrow would be better, I told myself. Tomorrow I'd feel at home. Sleep came fast, pulling me under like a tide. But when I woke, it wasn't to the soft light of morning. It was to darkness so complete it felt like I'd gone blind. My eyes strained against the void, searching for shapes, for anything to anchor me. The house was silent, but it was the kind of silence that screams, the kind that makes you hold your breath. Then it came again, a creak, this time closer, just beyond the foot of my mattress. My body froze, every nerve screaming to run, but I couldn't move. I sat up, heart pounding so loud it drowned out the world. The darkness was suffocating, pressing against my chest, and I stared into it, willing my eyes to adjust. Another creak, this one to the left, deliberate, like someone testing the floor. What if this isn't real? I thought, my mind grasping for logic. Maybe I was still dreaming, caught in that hazy space between sleep and waking where shadows take shape. But the air was too cold, the fear too sharp. 4 more creaks followed, each one farther back, moving toward the door. My breath caught as a faint outline flickered in the dark. A shape, human but wrong, like it didn't belong in this world. Before I could scream, the bedroom door flew open and moonlight spilled into the hallway, sharp and silver. There, framed in the light, was a man, tall, gaunt, his clothes tattered, his boots heavy against the floor. He didn't look at me, didn't pause. He sprinted down the hallway, his footsteps a frantic drumbeat that faded into the night. The front door was wide open, swinging on its hinges, letting the cold air rush in. I stumbled to my feet, my hands shaking as I fumbled for the light switch. The room lit up, harsh and unforgiving, revealing nothing but my own fear reflected in the empty space. I ran to the front door, locking it, my fingers clumsy against the bolt. My phone was in my hand before I knew it, dialing the police. My voice trembling as I tried to explain what had happened. He was in my room watching me sleep. The thought looped in my mind, a sickening refrain. The police arrived too late, their flashlights sweeping the empty house, their questions piling up like accusations. They searched the neighborhood, but no one matched the description I gave. 40-ish, worn clothes, boots that looked like they'd walked through hell. They suggested he might have been squatting in the house while it was vacant, a drifter who saw an empty shell and made it his own. But that didn't explain why he was in my room, why he stood over me in the dark, silent and still, like he was deciding my fate. Nested storytelling. I remembered a story my old roommate told me years ago, about a house he'd rented in a small town. He'd found strange marks on the walls, like someone had clawed at them. And at night, he'd hear whispers from the attic. He laughed it off, said it was just the wind, but he moved out a month later, pale and quiet, refusing to talk about it. I thought he was exaggerating, but now, standing in this house, I wondered if he'd seen something like I had. A shadow that didn't belong, a presence that lingered just out of sight. The landlord was apologetic, almost too quick to let me break the lease. I packed my things the next day, my hands still shaking as I loaded the truck. I found another place, a sterile apartment in a busier part of town, where the lights never flickered and the walls didn't whisper. But even now, months later, I can't shake the feeling that he's still out there, that he knows where I am. Every time I close my eyes, I see him standing there, his silhouette burned into the dark, waiting for me to fall asleep again. I check the locks twice before bed, and I keep a light on just in case. Because if he came back once, what's to stop him from coming again? The forest exhaled a cold, wet breath that curled around my neck, whispering secrets I wasn't meant to hear. I'd driven 2 hours to a cabin in the hills, a splintered wooden refuge tucked so deep in the wilderness that the world seemed to vanish. It was early October, the air sharp with the bite of fall, the trees ablaze with reds and golds that bled into the gray sky. I'd rented the place, an Airbnb far from any road or neighbor, for a week of solitude, a chance to shed the weight of city life and breathe. I wanted to camp, to feel the earth under me, to lose myself in the quiet, but as I stood on the cabin's sagging porch, the forest staring back with unblinking eyes, I felt it, a pulse beneath the silence, like the land was alive and watching. This place is wrong. The cabin was small, its walls lined with faded plaid wallpaper, the furniture heavy and worn, smelling of damp wood and old smoke. The windows were narrow, their panes warped, letting in slivers of light that danced on the floor like nervous ghosts. I dropped my bags, explored the rooms, and tried to ignore the unease gnawing at me. It was cozy enough, in an old-fashioned way, but the air was thick as if the cabin held its breath waiting for me to make a mistake. Just nerves, I told myself, lighting a fire in the stone hearth that night. The flames crackled, pushing back the dark, and for a few days I settled into a rhythm. Mornings on the porch with coffee, afternoons wandering the hills, evenings by the fire. The forest was silent, save for the rustle of leaves and the occasional bird. But its quiet wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, expectant like a predator lying in wait. On the 5th day, I packed my camping gear, a tent, sleeping bag, and enough food for 2 or 3 nights, and set out. I'd planned this from the start, craving the rawness of sleeping under the stars. There were trails nearby, but only one led directly from the cabin, a narrow path winding through the trees like a vein. I followed it, my boots sinking into the soft earth, the air growing colder as the forest closed around me. The trail was overgrown, roots twisting across the path, branches reaching out like skeletal hands. After 3 hours, maybe 4, I found a clearing, a small patch of open ground surrounded by towering pines, their needles carpeting the earth. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than camping on the trail itself, which felt too exposed, too watched. Why does this feel wrong? I shook off the thought, pitched my tent, and built a fire as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in blood and shadow. Night fell fast, the forest swallowing the last traces of light. I wrapped myself in a heavy sweater and jacket, the cold seeping into my bones. The fire cast flickering shadows on the trees, their branches swaying in a wind I couldn't feel. I ate a quick meal, the silence pressing against me, broken only by the snap of burning wood. As I sat staring into the flames, a prickling sensation crawled up my neck. Someone's here. My eyes darted to the trees, scanning the darkness beyond the fire's glow. Nothing. Just the endless black of the forest, the faint silver of moonlight filtering through the canopy. I told myself it was nothing, just the isolation playing tricks. But then I saw it. A figure moving between the trees, maybe 50 yards away. No flashlight, no sound, just a shadow walking where no one should be. My heart stuttered. I froze, my breath shallow, watching as the figure moved, slow and deliberate, weaving through the pines without a trail. They didn't glance my way, didn't pause, but I knew they'd seen me. My fire was the only light for miles, a beacon in the dark. "Who are you?" The figure vanished into the shadows, swallowed by the forest. But the unease stayed, coiling in my chest. I scanned the trees, my eyes straining, but saw nothing. No tracks, no movement, just the oppressive quiet. I stayed awake, feeding the fire, my hand resting on the small knife at my belt. "You're overreacting. It's just a hiker." But hikers don't wander at night, not here, not without light. An hour passed, then 2, and exhaustion tugged at me. I let the fire die, its embers fading to ash, and crawled into my tent, the darkness closing in like a shroud. I was drifting into a restless sleep when a sound jolted me awake. Footsteps, soft but deliberate, crunching through the leaves. "They're back." My eyes snapped open, my heart pounding so loud it drowned out the night. The steps were close, circling the clearing just beyond the edge of my vision. I held my breath, clutching the knife, my body rigid. The footsteps grew louder, then paused, so near I could almost feel their presence through the tent's thin walls. "They're right there." My mind raced, picturing a faceless figure standing inches away, staring at the tent, waiting. Then the steps moved off, fading into the distance as if they'd never been there. They didn't see me, they couldn't have. But I knew they had. No one wanders this deep in the woods by chance. Not at this hour. Not in this place. I didn't sleep. At first light, I tore down the tent, my hands shaking, and packed my gear. The forest was silent again, but it felt different now, like it was holding its breath, watching me leave. I followed the trail back, my flashlight cutting through, the early morning mist, every snap of a twig sending my pulse racing. The 4-hour trek felt endless, the trees pressing closer, their shadows shifting in ways that didn't make sense. He's following me. I kept glancing back, expecting to see him, a man, a shadow, something. But the trail was empty. By the time I reached the cabin, my legs were shaking, my body heavy with exhaustion. I locked the door, collapsed on the couch, and passed out. The memory of those footsteps fading like a bad dream. But it wasn't a dream. I woke hours later, the cabin dark, the fire long dead. The air was colder now, sharp against my skin, and the silence was gone, replaced by a faint rhythmic sound. Something scraping against the wood, slow and deliberate like nails on a chalkboard. My eyes flew open, my heart lurching. I sat up, my gaze darting to the back of the room. The window, its glass clouded with age, was moving, inching upward, the wood groaning under pressure. Someone's out there. I stumbled to my feet, my breath ragged, and saw him, a man. His face pale and gaunt, his eyes locked on mine through the glass. He sees me. His stare was empty, not angry or desperate, but cold, like he was studying me, memorizing me. Then as I lunged toward the window, he let it fall, the glass rattling in its frame, and vanished into the dark. I ran to the window, my hands shaking, but he was gone, swallowed by the forest. The yard was empty, the trees still, but I could feel him out there just beyond the light. He followed me back. I checked every lock, every window, my mind spinning. How had he found me? Why me? I grabbed my keys, packed my bag, and drove to a hotel in the nearest town, the cabin's shadow fading in my rearview mirror. But the fear didn't leave. It clung to me, heavy and cold, like the forest's breath. Days later, I couldn't shake it. I kept seeing him in my dreams, his pale face at the window, his eyes boring into me, his footsteps echoing in the dark. I searched online, looking for stories about the cabin, the hills, anything. I found nothing concrete, just whispers on obscure forums. A hiker who vanished years ago, a hunter who swore he saw a man in the woods, always at night, always watching. Is that him? I don't know who he was or what he wanted. But I know he wasn't lost, wasn't random. He'd seen me in the clearing, followed me back, waited until I was vulnerable. He's still out there. One night back in the city, I woke with a start, my heart racing. The apartment was silent, the city's hum faint through the walls. But something was wrong. I got up, checked the door, the windows, my hands trembling. On my kitchen counter, where I'd left nothing, was a single pine needle, its tip stained with something dark. He's been here. I don't know how or why, but I know it was him. The forest followed me home, and its whispers haven't stopped. He's waiting, and I'm not sure I can run. The snow fell like a shroud, swallowing the world in silence, but something in the air whispered danger. I'd been driving for hours, weaving through a town half buried in white, delivering food to people too skittish to brave the storm. It was past midnight. The kind of late where the world feels like it's holding its breath, waiting for you to make a mistake. My SUV hummed along the empty streets, its headlights cutting through the swirling flakes. But the cold seeped into my bones, a reminder that I was alone out here. Stay awake, stay sharp, I told myself, gripping the wheel tighter. I'd been doing food delivery for 3 years, a gig that paid the bills but wore me down, especially on nights like this, when the snow turned every road into a gamble. It was October, but winter had come early, blanketing the town in a premature frost. The orders kept coming, one after another, as if the whole town had decided to eat their feelings rather than face the storm. I was ready to call it quits, my eyes heavy, my fingers numb from the cold when one last order pinged through. One more, then home. It was from a McDonald's 10 minutes away, going to an address on the edge of town. I didn't think twice before accepting it. My mistake. The directions led me out of the main streets, past the flickering streetlights, and onto a road that stretched into darkness. I checked the map again, frowning. This wasn't a residential area. It was the kind of road people took to leave town, to disappear onto the highway and never look back. Why would anyone live out here? The thought gnawed at me as the trees closed in, their branches heavy with snow, casting shadows that danced like ghosts in my headlights. The road narrowed, barely wide enough for my SUV, and the snow was thicker, here, untouched by plow trucks. My tires crunched through it, the sound muffled by the storm. I drove slowly, wary of the trees pressing in on both sides, their gnarled limbs scraping the air like fingers. The map led me to a small turnoff, a single-lane street that vanished into the forest. I hesitated, my breath fogging the windshield. This doesn't feel right. But the order was paid for and I wasn't about to lose the tip. I turned, my headlights illuminating a winding driveway that seemed to go on forever. Finally, a house emerged from the dark, a medium-sized structure, its wooden siding weathered and gray, half buried in snow. The windows glowed faintly, like the eyes of something watching me. I parked, grabbed the bag of food, and stepped out, the cold biting through my jacket. My shoes sank into the snow, soaking my socks, and I cursed under my breath as I trudged toward the porch. The house felt wrong, like it didn't belong here, a forgotten thing left to rot in the woods. The porch was sagging, the wood slick with ice, and the air carried a faint smell of damp earth, like something buried too shallow. Just drop the food and go, I told myself, my heart beating a little faster. I knocked on the door, my knuckles stinging from the cold, and set the bag down ready to leave. But before I could step back, the door swung open and I froze. A man stood there, his face pale as death, his eyes sunken like he'd been carved from the snow itself. He was large, towering over me, wrapped in a heavy winter jacket that seemed too big for his frame. His hands hung at his sides, one of them twitching slightly like it wanted to reach for something. I forced a smile, holding up the bag. "Your order," I said, my voice unsteady. "I've got to get going." His face didn't move, didn't soften. For a moment I thought he hadn't heard me. Then his expression shifted, his lips curling into a frown so sharp it felt like a blade. He knows something I don't. The thought hit me like a punch, and I took a step back, my boots slipping on the icy porch. Before I could say another word, he stepped forward, his hand darting out, and the door slammed shut in my face, the sound swallowed by the storm. I stood there, stunned, the bag still in my hand. What just happened? My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. I set the bag down on the porch, my hands shaking, and turned to leave, but a sound stopped me cold. A muffled thud from the other side of the house, like a door being forced open. Nested storytelling. My cousin used to tell me about a delivery he made years ago out in a place like this. He'd dropped off a pizza at a house that looked abandoned, but when he knocked, someone answered from inside, whispering his name through the door. He ran, never looked back, and quit the job the next day. I laughed it off then, called him paranoid, but now, standing in the snow, I felt that same dread crawling up my spine. Someone was watching me, and they weren't inside the house anymore. I moved faster, my boots sinking deeper into the snow as I headed for my SUV. The thud came again, closer now from the corner of the house. I turned, my breath catching, and saw him, the man from the door, moving through the snow with terrifying speed. His jacket flapped open, revealing something in his hands. A coil of rope, thick and frayed, and something else, glinting faintly. In the moonlight, a knife? A tool? I couldn't tell, but my body reacted before my mind could catch up. Run. Now. My heart slammed against my ribs, adrenaline flooding my veins as I sprinted to my car. I fumbled with the keys, my fingers numb, and threw myself inside, locking the doors. The engine roared to life, and I glanced up to see him closing the distance, his face still pale, his eyes locked on me like a predator. I shifted into reverse, my tires spinning in the snow before they caught traction. He was close now, maybe 10 feet away, the rope swinging in his hand like a noose. I pressed the gas, the SUV lurching backward through the driveway, the trees blurring past. In the rear view mirror, I saw him stop, his figure shrinking as the snow swallowed him. He was still watching, his eyes burning through the dark. I hit the main road, my hands trembling on the wheel, and didn't stop until I was back in town. The lights of civilization a faint comfort. My phone buzzed, a notification from the delivery app, asking me to confirm the drop-off. I ignored it, my mind replaying that moment on the porch, the way his face had changed, the rope in his hand. The police were useless when I called them later, their voices tired and skeptical. No one lived at that address, they said, or at least no one who'd admit to it. They promised to check, but I knew they wouldn't find anything. The snow would have covered his tracks, erased any proof he was ever there. But I know what I saw, and I know what he wanted. I still deliver food, but I'm different now. I don't knock on doors anymore, don't linger. I drop the bags and leave, my eyes scanning the shadows for that pale face, that glint of rope. Every night I wonder if he's out there, waiting for me to come back. The darkness was alive, breathing, watching. I sat on my couch, the glow of the TV flickering across the room, painting shadows that danced like ghosts in the corners. It was late October, the air crisp with the promise of Halloween, and I was savoring a rare night alone, lost in the comfort of fast food and a mindless show. My small house, tucked in a quiet corner of the suburb, felt like a fortress, its fenced-in backyard a shield against the world. But as I tossed my empty takeout bag into the kitchen, I froze. A man stood in my backyard, his silhouette sharp against the moonlight, staring straight into my home. His eyes, even from a distance, burned with an unnatural intensity, like embers in a dying fire. This wasn't just a stranger. This was something wrong. Something that made the night feel like it was holding its breath, waiting for me to scream. The house was my sanctuary, a modest haven with creaky floors and windows that rattled in the autumn wind. I'd lived here for years, grown used to its quirks, the way the pipes groaned, the way the oak tree in the backyard cast jagged shadows across my walls. It was home, safe, predictable. That night I'd come home from a long shift, my body heavy with exhaustion, craving nothing more than the couch and the hum of the TV. I'd ordered greasy burgers, let the scent of fried onions fill the air, and settled in, the world outside forgotten. Halloween was close and the neighborhood was already draped in orange lights and plastic skeletons, but inside, I was cocooned in warmth, oblivious to the chill creeping closer, until I saw him. The backyard was small, enclosed by a tall wooden fence, a barrier I'd always trusted. No one could just wander in. No shortcut, no mistake. Yet there he was, standing still as a statue, his gaze locked on my house, on me. My heart lurched, a cold sweat prickling my neck. Who stands like that, motionless in someone else's yard? I fumbled with the porch light switch, my fingers clumsy, my breath shallow. The light flooded the backyard, revealing him more clearly, a young man, maybe in his 20s, his face pale, his eyes wide and tired, like he hadn't slept in days. They weren't just tired, they were wrong, hollow, carrying a weight that made my skin crawl. I slid the glass door open, the cold air rushing in, biting at my arms. "Hey, what are you doing?" I shouted, my voice sharper than I intended, cutting through the silence. He didn't flinch, didn't answer, just stared, his eyes boring, into me like he could see through my skull. I tried again, louder, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and fear. "You need to leave. This is my property." He tilted his head, a slow, deliberate movement, then turned and walked toward the gate, his steps casual, almost mocking. I rushed to the front window, watching as he disappeared down the street, his shadow swallowed by the dark. Relief washed over me, but it was thin, fragile like a cracked pane of glass. I stood there, my breath fogging the window, my mind racing. Why was he here? The question clawed at me, relentless. I stepped into the backyard, standing where he had, looking up at my house. The windows stared back, empty, revealing nothing. There was no reason for him to be there, no logic to his silent vigil. I tried to shake it off, pouring a drink, the liquid burning my throat as I sank back onto the couch. The show resumed, its colors blurring into noise, but my eyes kept drifting to the glass door, expecting to see him again, his face pressed against the pane. What did he want? The thought looped in my mind, a trance pulling me deeper into unease. I sipped my drink, the ice clinking softly, but every shadow in the room felt like it was moving, watching, waiting. Then it happened. I just started the next episode, the TV's glow the only light in the room, when footsteps broke the silence. Quick, urgent, racing across my backyard. My heart stopped, my body frozen for a split second before I leapt up. I ran to the kitchen, my pulse thundering, and there he was. The same man, his body pressed against the glass door, his hands clawing at the handle, trying to force it open. The porch light caught his face, and those eyes, those crazed, raging eyes, locked onto mine, burning with a fury that wasn't human. My hands grabbed the handle, holding it shut, my strength pitted against his desperation. His breathing was heavy, visible in the cold air, each exhale a cloud of rage. I backed away, my phone shaking in my hand as I dialed 911, my voice low, urgent, as I watched him push harder, the glass trembling under his weight. He's going to break through. The thought was a scream in my mind, a command to run, to hide, but I stood my ground, paralyzed by his gaze. Then, as suddenly as he'd appeared, he stopped. He stepped back, his eyes still fixed on me, unblinking, a predator sizing up its prey. He moved to the side of the house, disappearing into the shadows, but I knew he wasn't gone. I paced between windows, my flashlight sweeping the darkness, expecting him to lunge out at any moment. The house felt like a trap, its walls closing in, its safety an illusion. He's still out there. The thought was a loop, a relentless drumbeat in my chest. 5 minutes crawled by, each second an eternity, until the wail of sirens cut through the night. Footsteps erupted again, not fleeing but charging back to the door, his body slamming against it with renewed fury. He's not running. The realization hit me like ice water. He was choosing to fight, to break in, even with the police closing in. The cops arrived, their lights flashing red and blue, painting the house in chaos. They caught him mid-act, his hand still clawing at the door, his screams raw, unhinged. He fought them, his body thrashing, but they cuffed him, dragging him away. They told me he was high, his mind warped by something chemical, but that didn't explain the look in his eyes, the way they'd burned into me, marking me. They asked if I knew him, if I'd seen him before. I hadn't. No one had. He was a ghost, a shadow with no name, no reason. But those eyes, they weren't just high. They were hungry, driven by something deeper, something that didn't need drugs to fuel it. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch, the TV off, the house, silent but alive with his presence. Every creak, every rustle was him waiting to return. The police said he'd been released after a few weeks. His actions blamed on the drugs, not on whatever darkness lived in his gaze. He's out there. The thought anchored itself in my mind, a weight I couldn't shake. I see him in every shadow, every flicker of movement outside my window. The backyard, once my refuge, is now a stage, and I'm waiting for the curtain to rise again, for those eyes to find me in the dark. The snow fell like a curtain, sealing the world in a suffocating white hush, but something moved beyond it, something that knew we were alone. My name is Jonathan, and I was 16 when it happened, a night that clawed its way into my memory and never let go. It was a winter in Colorado, the kind where the storms rolled in heavy and merciless, burying roads and silencing towns. School had been canceled for the next day, a rare gift that had me and my friend Tyler buzzing with excitement. I'd packed a bag and trudged through the snow to his house, just a 5-minute walk through our quiet neighborhood. We were two kids dreaming of a day free from rules, unaware that the storm outside was hiding something far worse than ice. That night we laughed. The next day, we ran for our lives. Tyler's house was a familiar refuge, its walls lined with family photos and mismatched furniture, the air warm with the smell of pizza and popcorn. Our parents had to work the next morning, leaving us the run of the place, a teenage paradise. We stayed up late, sprawled on the living room floor, playing video games and trading stupid stories about girls and pranks. The windows rattled with the wind, snow piling high against the glass, but inside we were untouchable, wrapped in the glow of the TV and our own invincible youth. Nothing can hurt us here. The night passed in a blur of laughter and junk food, and we finally crashed in the early hours, the storm's howl lulling us to sleep. Morning came, gray and heavy, the world outside a swirl of white. I woke to the smell of Tyler making a sandwich in the kitchen, the clock reading just past 11. The house was quiet, the storm muffling everything beyond the walls. I was in the bathroom, splashing water on my face, when the doorbell cut through, the silence, a sharp, insistent chime that made my heart skip. Who's out in this weather? Tyler froze in the kitchen, his knife hovering over the bread. We exchanged a glance, half laughing at our own jumpiness. Probably some Jehovah's Witness, Tyler joked, but his voice was tight. Our neighborhood was safe, the kind of place where doors were left unlocked, where strangers didn't show up unannounced. So why am I scared? We crept to the front door, the cold seeping through the floorboards. The storm's roar, faint but relentless. Tyler peered through the peephole, his face paling. "It's some guy," he whispered. Before I could stop myself, I shouted, "Who are you?" Tyler elbowed me, his eyes wide with panic. "Stupid, Jonathan, so stupid." From the other side of the door came a voice, raw and desperate. "Help me, please, I'm in trouble, let me in." The words were wrong, not pleading but demanding, like a predator mimicking prey. Tyler shook his head, his hand on the lock, but the man pounded on the door, the wood shaking in its frame. He's not here to be saved. Panic surged through me, hot and electric. We bolted downstairs to the basement, our footsteps echoing in the dark. Tyler led me to a hidden corner behind a stack of old boxes, a secret spot he'd shown me years ago during hide-and-seek games. We crouched there, our breaths shallow, the cold concrete biting into my knees. Tyler fumbled for his phone, calling. His mom, Macy, who worked just 5 minutes away. "Someone's at the door," he whispered, his voice trembling. "He's trying to get in." Macy's voice was calm but urgent. "I'm coming. Stay hidden. She'll save us." But as Tyler hung up, a sound froze us both. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate, moving across the floor above. "He's inside." Heart pounded so loud I thought he'd hear it. The footsteps paused, then continued, slow and searching, as if he knew we were here. "He's hunting us." Tyler's eyes were wide, his face pale in the dim light filtering through a small basement window. "What do we do?" he hissed. I tried to stay calm, my mind racing. "We wait. Macy's coming." But Tyler shook his head, his voice breaking. "We can't just sit here, we have to run." I didn't want to move, didn't want to face whatever was upstairs, but I couldn't stay alone. If we stay, he'll find us. We crept to the window, a narrow rectangle near the ceiling, barely wide enough for us to fit through. Tyler climbed onto a crate, his hands shaking as he pushed the glass open, snow spilling inside. I laced my fingers together, boosting him up. He scrambled through, his sneakers scraping the frame, and reached back for me. "Grab the table," he whispered, pointing to a wooden coffee table nearby. I dragged it over, my arms burning, and climbed up, my hands slick with sweat. Tyler grabbed my arm, pulling with everything he had, and I squeezed through, the cold air hitting me like a slap. We collapsed in the snow, gasping, the storm swirling around us. We're free. But then I felt it. A presence, heavy and close, like eyes boring into my back. I turned, and there he was, standing just feet away, his figure blurred by the snow. He's been waiting. His face was gaunt, his short black hair dusted with snow, his eyes black pits that seemed to swallow the light. He wore a t-shirt and shorts, absurd in the freezing storm, but he didn't shiver, didn't move, just stared with a look that wasn't human. Cold, hungry, like we were prey. He knows us. My scream caught in my throat. Tyler grabbed my arm, and we ran, our boots slipping in the snow, the wind howling in our ears. We reached the front of the house just as Macy's car pulled into the driveway, her headlights cutting through the blizzard. The man lunged after us, his footsteps silent but fast, but when he saw Macy, he veered away, vanishing into the white. He's gone. For now. Macy rushed out, her face pale, pulling us into the car. She called the police, her voice steady but her hands shaking. We sat there, frozen, watching the snow fall, waiting for the sirens. The police arrived, their flashlights sweeping the yard, but the man was gone, his tracks already buried by the storm. They showed us a photo, a gaunt man with short black hair, a mugshot from a prison break less than a day ago. It's him. He was a fugitive, a predator who targeted boys our age, a monster who'd been watching us, waiting for the moment we were alone. They caught him that night, miles away, but the knowledge of what he was, what he wanted, sank into me like poison. He knew we were there. Years later, I'm 21, but the memory hasn't faded. I dream of that day, the snow, the footsteps, his eyes. In my nightmares, he's still out there, standing in the blizzard, watching. I found an old article online, buried in a local archive, a story about a man who'd lived in our town years ago, a drifter who'd vanish into the woods during storms. always returning with a look that unnerved people. No one knew his name, only that he was drawn to the cold, to the isolation. Was that him? I don't know. But I know he wasn't just a fugitive. There was something else in his eyes. Something older. Something that didn't belong in this world. Last winter, I was home alone, the snow falling heavy outside, just like that day. I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard it, a faint tap at the window. My heart stopped. I turned, expecting to see a branch, a bird, anything but him. The glass was fogged, but through it I saw a shape, tall, still, blurred by the snow. He's back. I grabbed a knife, my hands shaking, and ran to the door, checking the locks. When I looked again, the shape was gone, but on the porch, half buried in the snow, was a piece of paper. I didn't pick it up, didn't want to know what it said. I burned it in the sink, watching the flames curl around it. But the fear stayed. He's still out there, and he remembers me. The house felt alive that night, its walls humming with secrets as if it knew we were alone. It was a warm May evening, the kind where the air clings to your skin, heavy with the promise of summer. Cole, my cousin, and I were sprawled across the living room floor, laughing over a pizza box, the crusts scattered like ruins. Our parents were gone, called away to the hospital where my grandpa lay under sterile lights, his condition serious but not fatal. They'd left us in the care of Hunter, Cole's 15-year-old brother, who was less a babysitter and more a co-conspirator in our night of freedom. "Stay safe. Don't open the door for strangers," my mom had said, her voice tight with worry. I nodded, but the thrill of being unsupervised drowned out her warning. The house, a cozy suburban box in a neighborhood of identical homes, felt like a fortress. What could go wrong? Cole and I were 12, inseparable since we were old enough to share secrets. Hunter, with his lanky frame and easy grin, was the cool older cousin who never lorded his age over us. We ordered pizza, the greasy scent filling the air, and spent the evening goofing off, playing video games, tossing a foam football, and debating whether we'd sneak into the stash of soda in the garage. The house was ours, a playground of possibilities, and the night stretched out like a gift. But as the clock ticked past 9, a sharp knock on the front door sliced through our laughter. My heart stuttered, and the room seemed to shrink, the walls leaning in closer. Cole froze, the football dangling in his hand, and Hunter glanced up from his phone, his grin fading. I followed Cole to the door, my bare feet cold against the hardwood. Through the peephole I saw two men, older, maybe in their 30s, dressed in plain jackets and jeans. One had a clipboard, the other a toolbox, their faces unreadable in the dim porch light. "We're with the city," the man with the clipboard said, his voice flat, like he was reading from a script. "There's been reports of bad water pressure in the neighborhood. Are your parents home?" Cole hesitated, his hand on the doorknob. "They're not available," he said, repeating the line we'd been taught. The man's eyes narrowed, and he started asking questions. "How's the water pressure? Do the faucets work? Can we come in to check?" Something in his voice felt wrong, like a song played out of tune. Hunter appeared behind us, his presence steadying me. "The water's fine," he said, his tone polite but firm. "You should check the other houses." The men exchanged a glance, their faces still, like masks carved from wax. They lingered, the silence stretching until it felt like a physical weight. Finally, they turned and walked away, their footsteps fading into the night. But I couldn't shake the feeling that they hadn't really left. We shrugged it off, or tried to, returning to our games, but the air was different now, charged with an unseen threat. The house no longer felt like a fortress, it felt like a trap. Nested storytelling. My friend Jake once told me about a night he spent alone at his uncle's house. He was 13, and someone knocked on the door, claiming to be a neighbor needing help. Jake didn't open it, but he heard footsteps circling the house all night like someone testing every window. He never saw who it was, but he never stayed there again. I thought he was making it up, but now, standing in Cole's living room, I wondered if he'd felt this same dread, this sense that something was waiting just out of sight. We decided to sleep in Cole and Hunter's room, the three of us piling in to keep the night at bay. Hunter grabbed a sleeping bag from the garage and we spread it out on the floor, the room filled with the soft glow of a bedside lamp. We talked about dumb stuff, school, girls, the new game we wanted, until sleep pulled us under. But I didn't stay asleep long. A sound woke me, faint but unmistakable, from the far end of the house. It was like the house itself was whispering, warning me to listen closer. I slipped out of the sleeping bag, my heart pounding, and tiptoed to the bathroom. The hallway was dark, the shadows pooling like ink, and I hurried to finish, eager to get back to the safety of the bedroom. On my way back, I heard it again, a soft shuffle like footsteps trying not to be heard, coming from the family room. My blood ran cold and I froze, every nerve screaming to run. I crept back to the bedroom, my eyes darting to the corners, and found Cole and Hunter still asleep, their breathing steady. I shook them awake, whispering, "Someone's in the house." Their eyes widened and we moved as one, silent and trembling, toward the family room. The moonlight spilled through the windows, casting jagged shadows across the floor, and there they were. The two men from before, rifling through drawers, their movements quick and practiced. One of them turned, his eyes locking onto us, and I saw the glint of a knife in his hand, its blade catching the moonlight like a promise of pain. "Run. Now." The command exploded in my mind, and we bolted for the front door, our bare feet slapping against the floor. My hands fumbled with the lock, my breath ragged as the man with the knife moved toward us, his steps heavy and deliberate. We threw the door open just as a police car rolled by, its lights cutting through the dark. We spilled onto the lawn, waving frantically, our voices hoarse as we shouted for help. The cop stopped, his radio crackling, and within minutes more cars arrived, their sirens a lifeline. The officers stormed the house, and after a tense search, they dragged the two men out, their hands cuffed, their faces blank but furious. They'd gotten in through a broken window in the laundry room, the cops said, targeting our house because they knew it was just kids inside. Standing on the lawn, still in our underwear, we became a spectacle. Neighbors gathered, their whispers sharp as knives, and I saw kids from our school, classmates who'd never let us forget this. The shame burned hotter than the fear, but the fear was still there, lurking like a shadow. The cops said the men were part of a ring that preyed on vulnerable homes, but that didn't erase the image of the knife, the way it gleamed, or the thought of what might have happened if we hadn't run. Every time I close my eyes, I see that blade, feel those eyes on me, and I wonder if they'll come back. The snow fell like a shroud, sealing us in, but it was the shadow in the backyard that stopped my heart. It was Christmas Day 2018, and I was at Grace's parents' house, surrounded by warmth, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. But my chest was tight, my social battery drained. I was ready to leave, to escape the unfamiliar faces, when the storm hit, a relentless blizzard that locked us in for the night. As I lay beside Grace in the spare bedroom, a strange sound pierced the silence. A scraping, deliberate like nails on glass. I peered out the window, and there he was, a man standing in the snow, his eyes locked on me, his silhouette clutching something heavy. This wasn't a prank. This was a nightmare, one that would haunt me long after the snow melted. The drive to Grace's parents' house had been filled with nervous excitement. It was my first time meeting her family, and I wanted to make a good impression. Their home was a cozy, sprawling place in a small town, decked out in Christmas lights and wreaths, the air thick with the scent of pine and roasted turkey. Grace's family was welcoming. Her dad, a gruff but kind man who shared my love for hunting and basketball. We bonded over stories, his laughter easing my nerves. But after hours of small talk, I was unraveling. I've always been like this. Crowds, even friendly ones, drain me, leave me craving solitude. By late afternoon, my smiles were forced. My words clipped. I whispered to Grace that we should head home, but then we saw the snow. It had piled up fast, blanketing the roads in a thick, treacherous layer. The news warned of hazardous conditions, and Grace's mom insisted we stay. "You're family now," she said, her voice warm but final. I nodded, swallowing my unease, but the house felt too full, too alive, its walls closing in. We settled, in for the night, the storm raging outside, the wind howling like a living thing. Grace's parents prepared a feast, and I tried to relax, focusing on her dad's stories of deer hunts and old games. But my mind wandered, the weight of the unfamiliar pressing against me. Just one night, I told myself, sipping coffee to stay, grounded. Grace was thrilled to stay, her eyes bright as she chatted with her siblings, but I felt like an outsider, a guest in a world I didn't belong to. When bedtime came, Grace led me to the spare bedroom, a small, cluttered space with a sagging mattress and a window overlooking the backyard. We curled up under blankets, the TV casting a soft glow as a horror movie played. Grace fell asleep quickly, her head on my chest, her breathing steady. I tried to follow, but my eyes stayed open, fixed on the ceiling. The storm's roar, a constant hum in my ears. Then I heard it, a faint rhythmic scraping like branches dragging across the window. I sat up, my heart stuttering, the room suddenly too quiet, too still. The sound came again, sharper, deliberate, not the wind or the trees. I eased out of bed, careful not to wake Grace, and crept to the window. The backyard was a sea of white, the snow falling in thick curtains. But there, in the center, stood a man. He was motionless, his dark coat stark against the snow, his head tilted up, staring at the house, at me. My breath caught, my hands trembling as I gripped the curtain. Who stands in a blizzard watching a stranger's home? His face was obscured, but his eyes glinted, catching the faint light from the house, burning with a purpose I couldn't name. I pressed closer to the glass, squinting, but the snow blurred his features, turning him into a specter, a shadow that didn't belong. I tried to wake Grace, shaking her gently, then harder, but she was a heavy sleeper, her murmurs soft and useless. Panic clawed at me, a voice in my head screaming to do something, anything. He's not supposed to be here. I grabbed my coat, my boots, my mind racing. It was stupid, reckless, but I couldn't just stand there, couldn't let him watch us like prey. I slipped downstairs, the house dark, the family asleep, the silence heavy with the weight of the storm. The back door creaked as I opened it, the cold biting my face, the snow soaking my boots. I stepped into the yard, my flashlight cutting through the blizzard, searching for him. He was gone, the snow smooth, unbroken, as if he'd never been there, but then I saw them, footprints fresh, leading toward the shed at the edge of the yard. My heart pounded, a drumbeat urging me forward, even as every instinct screamed to run. I followed the tracks, the snow crunching under my feet, the wind swallowing my breath. The shed loomed ahead, its door slightly ajar, a black slit in the white. The scraping sound came again, louder, metallic, like a blade on steel. My flashlight shook in my hand, its beam trembling as I approached. "What are you doing?" The question looped in my mind, a trance pulling me closer, my fear a living, a thing wrapped around my chest. I reached the door, my hand hovering when it swung open, and there he was. The man no more than 10 feet away, his face half lit, his curly black hair dusted with snow. In his hands was a sledgehammer, its head glinting, heavy with intent. His eyes locked onto mine, not surprised, not afraid, but hungry, a predator who'd been waiting for this moment. I froze, my scream caught in my throat, my body betraying me. For a heartbeat we stood there, the storm swirling around us, the world reduced to his gaze and the weight of that hammer. Then I ran, my legs churning through the snow, my lungs burning. He lunged after me, his footsteps heavy, closing the distance. I glanced back, his silhouette a blur, the hammer raised, a promise of violence. Run faster. The command was a pulse in my veins, driving me toward the house. I reached the door, fumbling with the handle, my hands numb, my vision tunneling. He was close. So close. But as I threw myself inside and slammed the door, he vanished, swallowed by the storm, as if he'd never been real. I woke Grace, my voice frantic, my words tumbling over each other. She stirred, her eyes wide, her panic mirroring mine as I told her what happened. We rushed to her parents, their faces groggy, then alarmed. Her dad checked the security cameras, his brow furrowing as he played the footage. There he was, a blurry figure in the snow, but his face was indistinct, a smudge of shadow. No features, no identity, just a ghost in the night. Grace's parents exchanged glances, their voices low, insisting it was a prank, a local kid playing a sick joke. No, need to call the police, her mom said, her smile forced. I stared at them, my stomach twisting. A prank? With a sledgehammer? Their dismissal felt wrong, like they were hiding something, protecting something. But what? We left the next morning, the roads cleared, the storm a memory. I drove in silence, Grace's hand in mine, but my mind was back in that yard, locked in his gaze. I haven't returned to her parents' house, not for Christmas, not for anything. I make excuses, but the truth is, I see him every time I close my eyes. His eyes, his hammer, his shadow in the snow. He's still out there, a thought that anchors itself in my bones, a fear that no amount of warmth can thaw. The Christmas tree lights flickered, casting a warm glow across the living room, but the darkness outside pressed against the windows like a living thing, hungry and patient. It was Christmas Eve, and I was alone on the couch, savoring a rare moment of quiet. My boys, Luke, just 5, and Logan, 8, were asleep in their shared room, dreaming of presents and snow. My wife was upstairs, lost in the deep sleep of exhaustion after weeks of holiday preparations. The house, nestled in the country on 15 acres of woods and trails, felt like a fortress of warmth, sealed against the cold December night. I sipped hot chocolate, the fireplace casting dancing shadows, a Christmas movie humming softly on the TV. This is perfection. But perfection is fragile, and something was waiting to shatter it. The air was thick with the scent of pine and cinnamon, the tree sparkling with ornaments the boys had made. I scrolled through my phone, half lost in games and social media, the movie's dialogue a distant murmur. The world felt right, complete, until a sound cut through the calm, a heavy thud, dull and deliberate, from the far side of the house. What was that? My heart gave a sharp lurch, but I brushed it off. Old houses settle, pipes groan, especially in winter. I turned back to my phone, but the thud came again, louder, like a fist striking wood. That's not the house. I set my mug down, my pulse quickening, and stood, my eyes scanning the room. The fire crackled, the tree lights blinked, but the silence between was wrong, heavy, like the air before a storm. I moved to the front window, pulling back the curtain. The yard was dark, the woods beyond a wall of black, their branches swaying faintly under the stars. Nothing. I checked the kitchen window over the sink, the glass cold against my hand, but saw only my reflection staring back, pale and tense. You're imagining things. I crossed to the boys' room, easing the door open. Luke and Logan were asleep, their faces soft in the glow of a nightlight, blankets tangled around them. My wife's room was next, her breathing slow and steady, undisturbed. I exhaled, my shoulders loosening, but as I turned back to the living room, the thud came again, sharper, more insistent. Someone's out there. I stepped outside, my slippers sinking into the frost-covered patio, the cold biting through my sweater. The night was still, the stars sharp overhead, but the woods felt alive, their shadows shifting in ways that didn't match the wind. I circled the house, my breath fogging in the air, checking every window, every door. Nothing. No footprints, no signs of disturbance. It's in your head. I headed back inside, my hands numb, ready to lock the sliding glass door and forget it. But then it came. A scream, high and raw, slicing through the night like a blade. Luke. My youngest boy's voice, unmistakable, filled with terror. He's in trouble. I tore through the house, my heart pounding, and burst into the boys' room, flipping on the light. Logan jolted awake, his eyes wide with panic, but Luke's bed was empty. The blankets thrown back, the window was open, its frame yawning wide, cold air pouring in. He's gone. "Where's Luke?" I shouted, my voice breaking. Logan stammered, "I don't know." I grabbed his shoulders, my hands shaking. "Go wake Mom, tell her to call the police. Now." He ran, his footsteps fading as I turned to the window, my mind racing. Someone took him. I grabbed my 9mm handgun from the safe, its weight cold and heavy, and ran outside, the night swallowing me whole. The backyard stretched, into the woods, a maze of trees and trails that I knew better than anyone. I called Luke's name, my voice hoarse, the cold burning my lungs. "Where are you?" A faint scream answered, thin and desperate, from deep in the forest. I plunged into the trees, branches clawing at my face, the ground uneven under my feet. The darkness was absolute, the stars hidden by the canopy, but I followed the sound, my heart a drum in my chest. "Luke!" I shouted again and again, but the scream stopped, leaving only silence. He's gone. I'm too late. Panic clawed at me, my vision blurring, my breath ragged. I stumbled through the underbrush, my gun trembling in my hand, every shadow a threat. Then I heard it. Soft, deliberate, the crunch of leaves underfoot. Not mine. Someone's here. My skin prickled, my eyes straining in the dark. A faint sound followed, like a sharp intake of breath, held and released. They're close. I flicked on my flashlight, its beam cutting through the night, sweeping the trees. I'd kept it off, not wanting to give away my position, but now I had no choice. I turned in circles, the light shaking, my heart pounding. "Where are you?" Then I saw it, a shadow on the ground, low and still, just beyond a cluster of pines. I stepped closer, my breath shallow, and the beam fell on them. A man, his body pressed against Luke, his hands around my son's throat. "He's killing him. Get off him," I roared, raising the gun. The man's head snapped up, his face hidden behind a black ski mask, his eyes glinting like a predator's. He released Luke and bolted, vanishing into the trees before I could pull the trigger. I should have shot him. I dropped to my knees, pulling Luke into my arms. He was limp, his face pale, bruises blooming on his neck, scratches crisscrossing his cheeks. "Stay with me," I whispered, my voice breaking. I carried him back, my legs burning, the forest a blur around me. The police were at the house when we arrived, their lights flashing, my wife sobbing as she took Luke from me. He was alive, but barely, his breathing shallow. My boy almost died. At the hospital, Luke woke, his eyes haunted. He told us the man had tapped on the window, his voice soft, familiar, saying he was me, dressed up for a Christmas surprise. Luke, trusting, had unlocked the window, followed him outside. He used my voice. The police searched the woods, found nothing, no tracks, no trace of the man. I gave them his description, tall, lean, masked, but it wasn't enough. He was gone, a ghost in the night. Luke came home, his body healing, but his eyes carried a fear that broke my heart. He'll never feel safe again. My wife and I barely slept, watching the windows, jumping at every sound. He's still out there. Months passed, but the fear didn't fade. I dreamed of him, his masked face at the window, his hands on Luke, his eyes burning through the dark. I found an old story in a local paper, buried in the archives. A child who'd vanished from a nearby farm decades ago, last seen with a stranger in the woods. No one was caught, no body found. Is that him? The thought gnawed at me, a worm in my mind. I installed cameras, locked every window, but the woods felt alive, watching, waiting. He knows where we live. Last Christmas, a year later, I was checking. The cameras before bed, the house quiet, the tree lights glowing. The backyard feed flickered, then froze on a single frame. A figure at the edge of the woods, tall and lean, his face hidden by a mask. He's back. My heart stopped. I grabbed my gun, ran outside, but he was gone, the snow untouched. On the porch, half buried in frost, was a small toy, a plastic reindeer, like the ones Luke loved, its antlers snapped. He's playing with us. I burned it, the plastic melting into ash, but the fear stayed, cold and sharp. He's out there, and he's not done. The Christmas tree lights flickered, casting a warm glow across the living room. But the darkness outside pressed against the windows like a living thing, hungry and patient. It was Christmas Eve, and I was alone on the couch, savoring a rare moment of quiet. My boys, Luke, just 5, and Logan, 8, were asleep in their shared room, dreaming of presents and snow. My wife was upstairs, lost in the deep sleep of exhaustion after weeks of holiday preparations. The house, nestled in the country on 15 acres of woods and trails, felt like a fortress of warmth, sealed against the cold December night. I sipped hot chocolate, the fireplace casting dancing shadows, a Christmas movie humming softly on the TV. This is perfection. But perfection is fragile, and something was waiting to shatter it. The air was thick with the scent of pine and cinnamon, the tree sparkling with ornaments the boys had made. I scrolled through my phone, half lost in games and social media, the movie's dialogue a distant murmur. The world felt right, complete, until a sound cut through the calm, a heavy thud, dull and deliberate, from the far side of the house. What was that? My heart gave a sharp lurch, but I brushed it off. Old houses settle, pipes groan, especially in winter. I turned back to my phone, but the thud came again, louder, like a fist striking wood. That's not the house. I set my mug down, my pulse quickening, and stood, my eyes scanning the room. The fire crackled, the tree lights blinked, but the silence between was wrong, heavy, like the air before a storm. I moved to the front window, pulling back the curtain. The yard was dark, the woods beyond a wall of black, their branches swaying faintly under the stars. Nothing. I checked the kitchen window over the sink, the glass cold against my hand, but saw only my reflection staring back, pale and tense. You're imagining things. I crossed to the boys' room, easing the door open. Luke and Logan were asleep, their faces soft in the glow of a nightlight, blankets tangled around them. My wife's room was next, her breathing slow and steady, undisturbed. I exhaled, my shoulders loosening. But as I turned back to the living room, the thud came again, sharper, more insistent. Someone's out there. I stepped outside, my slippers sinking into the frost-covered patio, the cold biting through my sweater. The night was still, the stars sharp overhead, but the woods felt alive, their shadows shifting in ways that didn't match the wind. I circled the house, my breath fogging in the air, checking every window, every door. Nothing. No footprints, no signs of disturbance. It's in your head. I headed back inside, my hands numb, ready to lock the sliding glass door and forget it. But then it came. A scream, high and raw, slicing through the night like a blade. Luke. My youngest boy's voice, unmistakable, filled with terror. He's in trouble. I tore through the house, my heart pounding, and burst into the boy's room, flipping on the light. Logan jolted awake, his eyes wide with panic, but Luke's bed was empty, the blankets thrown back. The window was open, its frame yawning wide, cold air pouring in. He's gone. "Where's Luke?" I shouted, my voice breaking. Logan stammered, "I don't know." I grabbed his shoulders, my hands shaking. "Go wake Mom, tell her to call the police. Now." He ran, his footsteps fading as I turned to the window, my mind racing. Someone took him. I grabbed my 9mm handgun from the safe, its weight cold and heavy, and ran outside, the night swallowing me whole. The backyard stretched, into the woods, a maze of trees and trails that I knew better than anyone. I called Luke's name, my voice hoarse, the cold burning my lungs. "Where are you?" A faint scream answered, thin and desperate, from deep in the forest. I plunged into the trees, branches clawing at my face, the ground uneven under my feet. The darkness was absolute, the stars hidden by the canopy, but I followed the sound, my heart a drum in my chest. "Luke!" I shouted again and again, but the screams stopped, leaving only silence. He's gone. I'm too late. Panic clawed at me, my vision blurring, my breath ragged. I stumbled through the underbrush, my gun trembling in my hand, every shadow a threat. Then I heard it. Soft, deliberate, the crunch of leaves underfoot. Not mine. Someone's here. My skin prickled, my eyes straining in the dark. A faint sound followed, like a sharp intake of breath, held and released. They're close. I flicked on my flashlight, its beam cutting through the night, sweeping the trees. I'd kept it off, not wanting to give away my position, but now I had no choice. I turned in circles, the light shaking, my heart pounding. "Where are you?" Then I saw it, a shadow on the ground, low and still, just beyond a cluster of pines. I stepped closer, my breath shallow, and the beam fell on them. A man, his body pressed against Luke, his hands around my son's throat. "He's killing him. Get off him," I roared, raising the gun. The man's head snapped up, his face hidden behind a black ski mask, his eyes glinting like a predator's. He released Luke and bolted, vanishing into the trees before I could pull the trigger. I should have shot him. I dropped to my knees, pulling Luke into my arms. He was limp, his face pale, bruises blooming on his neck, scratches crisscrossing his cheeks. "Stay with me," I whispered, my voice breaking. I carried him back, my legs burning, the forest a blur around me. The police were at the house when we arrived, their lights flashing, my wife sobbing as she took Luke from me. He was alive, but barely, his breathing shallow. My boy almost died. At the hospital, Luke woke, his eyes haunted. He told us the man had tapped on the window, his voice soft, familiar, saying he was me, dressed up for a Christmas surprise. Luke, trusting, had unlocked the window, followed him outside. He used my voice. The police searched the woods, found nothing, no tracks, no trace of the man. I gave them his description, tall, lean, masked, but it wasn't enough. He was gone, a ghost in the night. Luke came home, his body healing, but his eyes carried a fear that broke my heart. He'll never feel safe again. My wife and I barely slept, watching the windows, jumping at every sound. He's still out there. Months passed, but the fear didn't fade. I dreamed of him, his masked face at the window, his hands on Luke, his eyes burning through the dark. I found an old story in a local paper, buried in the archives. A child who'd vanished from a nearby farm decades ago, last seen with a stranger in the woods. No one was caught, no body found. Is that him? The thought gnawed at me, a worm in my mind. I installed cameras, locked every window, but the woods felt alive, watching, waiting. He knows where we live. Last Christmas, a year later, I was checking. The cameras before bed, the house quiet, the tree lights glowing. The backyard feed flickered, then froze on a single frame. A figure at the edge of the woods, tall and lean, his face hidden by a mask. He's back. My heart stopped. I grabbed my gun, ran outside, but he was gone, the snow untouched. On the porch, half buried in frost, was a small toy, a plastic reindeer, like the ones Luke loved, its antlers snapped. He's playing with us. I burned it, the plastic melting into ash, but the fear stayed cold and sharp. He's out there and he's not done. The cold November air was sharp, but it was his eyes, dark, unblinking, peering through the keyhole, that carved a wound in my soul. My name is Jonathan, and I was 8 years old that Thanksgiving, standing in my grandparents' old townhouse, where the scent of roasted turkey and pipe smoke wrapped around me like a warm blanket. But beneath the laughter and clinking plates, a shadow grew, slithering through the cracks of our family's joy. My mother's tears stained the kitchen. Tiles, my grandmother's kindness opened our door to a stranger, and I learned that even a home filled with love could cradle monsters. This is the story of how one night stole my trust, leaving me to see his gaze in every darkened doorway, a fear that clings to me like frost on glass. The drive to my grandparents' house was a ritual, one I'd known since I could remember. The car hummed along suburban roads, the November sky heavy with gray clouds promising snow. I pressed my face to the window, my breath fogging the glass, drawing stars and faces as my parents murmured in the front seat. Their voices were low, tense, as if they carried secrets I was too young to grasp. My grandparents' house was a time capsule, a narrow townhouse squeezed between others in a crowded suburb, its walls holding decades of my mother's childhood. I loved it. The sagging porch, the attic stuffed with dusty board games, the way the staircase groaned under my feet like it was telling stories. But this year the air felt different, heavier, like the house was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. We arrived to a flurry of warmth, the door swinging open to reveal my grandmother, her apron dusted with flour, her smile wide, but brittle. My grandfather sat in his armchair, his pipe curling smoke into the air, his eyes crinkling as he ruffled my hair. The table was set, a mosaic of steaming dishes, turkey, stuffing, sweet potatoes piled high. But my mother was quiet, her eyes red, her hands fidgeting with her napkin. I watched her from across the table. My fork paused, a knot forming in my chest. Why is she sad? I wondered. The question a quiet hum in my mind. In the kitchen, she helped my grandmother, chopping carrots, her movements mechanical. Then, her shoulders shook and she was crying, her sobs soft but raw, slicing through the chatter. I stood in the doorway, my sneakers scuffing the linoleum, unsure if I should run to her or hide. My grandmother wrapped her arms around her, whispering, but her eyes flicked to me, and she forced a smile. "Jonathan, we're out of cranberry sauce," she said, her voice too bright. "Come with me to the store." I nodded, eager to escape the weight of my mother's tears, not knowing I was stepping into a different kind of trap. The walk was short, the cold biting my cheeks, my scarf tight around my neck. The suburb was quiet, the streets lined with skeletal trees and glowing porch lights, each house a pocket of warmth against the gray. The store's neon sign buzzed faintly, casting a sickly glow on the sidewalk. As we approached, I saw him, a man leaning against the wall, his coat tattered, his beard matted with grime. His eyes locked onto us, dark and sharp, like they could cut through flesh. They weren't just tired. They were alive, hungry, pinning me in place. He smiled, his teeth stained, his gaze never wavering, and I pressed closer to my grandmother, my heart stuttering. "Evening," he said, his voice low, gravelly, and I felt it crawl down my spine. Inside, the store was bright, the aisles crowded with last-minute shoppers. My grandmother grabbed a can of cranberry sauce, her fingers lingering on the shelf as if she sensed something too. I stayed close, my eyes darting to the entrance, expecting him to follow. He didn't, but his presence clung to me, a shadow I couldn't shake. When we stepped outside, he was still there, his posture unchanged, his eyes fixed on us. "Having a feast, huh?" he said, pointing to the can, his smile widening. "I'm cold, hungry, got nowhere to go." His words were a plea, but his tone was wrong, too smooth, too practiced. My grandmother's face softened, her eyes warm with a kindness I'd always admired. "Come with us," she said, her voice steady, as if inviting a friend. My stomach dropped, a cold dread spreading through me like ink in water. Why would she do that? I wanted to scream, to pull her back, but my voice was gone, my feet rooted to the pavement. He followed us, his steps uneven, his coat reeking of damp earth and stale smoke. I kept my eyes on the ground, counting cracks in the sidewalk, but I felt his gaze on my back, heavy, unyielding. "You're a quiet one," he said, his voice curling around me, and I flinched, my silence a shield I clung to. The walk felt endless, the cold seeping into my bones, the townhouse looming ahead like a beacon I no longer trusted. When we entered, my parents' faces froze, their eyes darting from the stranger to my grandmother. "He's hungry," she said simply, as if that erased the danger. My mother's jaw tightened, her hands clenching, but my grandfather nodded, his voice calm. "We've done this before," he said, and I saw my mother's eyes widen, a flash of fear breaking through. Her composure. "Done this before?" The thought was a splinter, sharp and unyielding, burrowing deeper with every glance at the man. Dinner was a nightmare cloaked in normalcy. The table was crowded, the candles flickering, casting shadows that danced like specters on the walls. I sat across from him, my plate untouched, his eyes never leaving me. He ate slowly, his fork scraping the plate, each bite deliberate, as if he was savoring more than the food. His gaze was a weight, pressing against my chest, making it hard to breathe. I tried to focus on my family, my mother's forced smile, my grandfather's stories, my grandmother's chatter, but his presence was a void, swallowing the warmth. He didn't speak much, his answers short, his voice low, but his eyes roamed, lingering on me, on the house, on the cracks in our safety. My mother's hands trembled, her napkin twisted in her lap, and I saw my father's jaw clench, his eyes flicking to the door. They know he's wrong, I thought, but no one moved. No one spoke the truth. When dinner ended, I thought he'd leave, his hunger fed, his presence a memory to bury. But my grandmother's voice cut through the chatter. "It's snowing," she said, her eyes soft. "He can sleep on the couch." My heart stopped, my breath shallow as my parents' voices rose low but urgent. "It's not safe," my mother hissed, her face pale, but my grandparents were unmoved, their faith a wall I couldn't breach. "We've always helped those in need," my grandfather said, and I saw my mother's eyes glisten, not with tears but with rage, a fire I'd never seen. They relented, locking our bedroom door that night, but the house felt alive, its walls watching, its silence a lie. I lay between my parents, the bed too small, their breathing uneven, their warmth a fragile shield. Sleep was impossible. The stranger's presence a weight downstairs, his eyes a ghost in my mind. The house was old, its sounds unfamiliar, the groan of pipes, the rustle of wind, the creak of floorboards settling. Each one was him, moving, waiting. He's still here. The thought was a loop, a trance pulling me deeper into fear, my heart racing in the dark. I needed to pee, the pressure unbearable, a child's need overriding my terror. I slipped out, my bare feet cold on the hardwood, the hallway stretching before me like a tunnel. The bathroom was small, its door warped, the lock broken, leaving only an empty keyhole that stared back like an unblinking eye. I sat in the dark, my legs tingling, my breath shallow, the house silent but alive. Every shadow was him, every rustle, his footsteps. My fear a living thing wrapped around my chest. It took longer than I expected, my body tense, my mind racing. I stood, pulling up my pants, my hands shaking, when I saw it, a glint in the keyhole, a dark, unblinking eye staring. Back, his eye the same one that had burned into me all day, sharp, hungry, a predator's gaze that stripped me bare. My scream tore through the silence, raw, desperate, as I threw myself at the door, my small body holding it shut. My parents' footsteps pounded, their voices calling, but I didn't move, my sobs choking me as I pointed to the hall. "He was there," I gasped, my finger trembling, and I saw my mother's face crumple, her scream echoing as she turned on my grandparents. "How could you let him in?" she cried, her voice breaking not just with anger but with grief, a realization that her childhood home was no longer safe. My grandmother stammered, her hands fluttering, but my grandfather was silent, his face heavy with a truth he couldn't voice. The man was gone, slipped out in the chaos, his footsteps erased by the snow. We left that night, the car packed in a frenzy, my mother crying the whole way home. I sat in the back seat, staring at the passing lights, his eye burned into my memory, a scar I couldn't touch. The snow fell thickly, blanketing the world, but it couldn't cover the fear that followed me. We never returned, the townhouse a ghost in our past, its warmth tainted by his gaze. My mother's tears were more than anger. They were mourning, a loss of something sacred, a home that had once been hers. I see him in my dreams, his eye waiting behind every door, his smile a promise of return. He's out there, a thought that anchors itself in my bones. A fear that no holiday can erase, a shadow that grows with every passing year. Years later, I asked my mother about that night, my voice hesitant, afraid to reopen the wound. She looked away, her hands twisting, and said my grandmother's mind was slipping, her kindness a vulnerability exploited by a predator. But she didn't know who he was, what he wanted, why his eyes chose me. I think of the keyhole, its empty stare, and wonder if he's still watching, waiting for another door to open, another child to trust. The house is gone now, sold after my grandmother passed, but its memory lingers, a place where love and fear intertwined, where I learned that safety is a lie and strangers carry darkness in their eyes. The parking lot stretched out like a battlefield, littered with shadows and the ghosts of Black Friday's frenzy. But I didn't see the real danger until it was too late. It was a few years ago, and I'd done something I swore I never would. Dragged myself out of bed at 4 a.m. to join the madness of holiday shopping. I wanted to surprise my kids, to see their faces light up when they woke to a Christmas tree already surrounded by gifts, wrapped and ready. A memory to carry forever. My wife and kids had made a list, meticulous and hopeful, and I was determined to check every box. But as I stood in the cold pre-dawn air outside Target, the crowd buzzing with restless energy, I felt a prickle of unease, like the world was holding its breath. Something's watching. The doors opened at 6 a.m., and the mob surged forward, a tide of greed and desperation. I moved fast, my mental map guiding me through the aisles, toys, electronics, clothes, grabbing everything on the list. I paid extra to have the gifts wrapped, my clumsy hands no match for the crisp folds and ribbons. By just before 7 a.m., I was out, pushing a cart piled high with presents. The parking lot quieter now, the sky still dark. I reached my car, the trunk yawning open, and started loading, my breath fogging in the cold. Almost done. That's when he appeared. A man, lean and wiry, stepping from the shadows between the cars, his smile too wide, too practiced. "He doesn't belong here. Need a hand?" he asked, his voice smooth but edged with something I couldn't place. His eyes were sharp, glinting under the sodium lights, his jacket scuffed and too thin for the chill. I shook my head, my gut tightening. "I'm good, thanks." But he didn't move, just stood there, his hands in his pockets, watching me. He's not leaving. I kept loading, faster now, but he stepped closer, reaching for the cart. "Looks heavy," he said, his hand brushing the gifts. I snapped, "Back off," my voice louder than I meant. His smile faltered, his eyes narrowing, and before I could react, he started pulling boxes from the cart, stacking them in my trunk like he owned them. What the hell? Rage flared, hot and reckless. I shoved him hard, sending him stumbling into a parked car behind him. He caught himself, his face twisting with anger, and shoved me back, his strength surprising, sending me reeling into another man passing by. The stranger steadied himself, glaring at us. "Act like adults," he muttered, brushing past, his judgment stinging. I turned back to the first man, and he was moving, a gift box in his hands, heading for the shadows. "He's stealing it." I lunged, grabbing his shirt, yanking him back. My fist connected with his face, a sickening crunch under my knuckles, and he hit the pavement, the box tumbling across the asphalt. "Got you." I grabbed the box, my heart pounding, and looked back at him. He was propped against a car, clutching, his face blood seeping between his fingers. His eyes burned into me, not just angry but wrong, like he was memorizing every detail of my soul. I laughed, a nervous reflex, taunting him about the gift's durability, but his stare didn't waver, a promise of something darker. He's not done with me. I finished loading, my hands shaking, his gaze heavy on my back. I drove off, the adrenaline fading, replaced by a sick dread. That was a mistake. Half a mile down the road, I reached for my wallet to set it in the cup holder, a habit from years of driving. My pocket was empty. No. I pulled over, patting myself down, my stomach sinking. The wallet was gone. $80, credit cards, debit cards, my driver's license with my address. They planned this. The second man, the one I'd bumped into, he'd picked my pocket while the first distracted me. The first man's eyes, that rage, flashed in my mind. He knows where I live. I canceled my cards from the car, my voice shaking as I spoke to the bank, but the license haunted me. I drove home trying to bury the fear, telling myself it was over. It's not over. I told my wife, keeping my voice low so the kids wouldn't hear. She urged me to call the police, but what could they do? A lost wallet. A fight in a parking lot. No proof, no names. I brushed it off, put on a brave face, but sleep wouldn't come. I lay in bed, the house too quiet. The memory of his eyes gnawing at me. What if he comes? Sometime in the night, a sound woke me. Soft, rhythmic, like paper tearing, the gifts. My heart sank. I crept down the hall barefoot, the floor cold against my skin, praying it was one of the kids impatient for Christmas. Please let it be them. I rounded the corner to the living room, and the world stopped. Under the Christmas tree, surrounded by torn wrapping paper and open boxes, crouched a man, the one from the parking lot, his face bruised, his eyes glinting with malice. He's here. Before I could move, a fist slammed into my face, pain exploding in my skull. I staggered, nearly falling, but an arm caught me, yanking me forward. The second man, his face close, his breath hot and sour. You're lucky we didn't. Go to your kid's bedroom and unwrap them, he hissed, his words a knife in my gut. They know where my kids sleep. Another punch sent me to the floor, the room spinning. By the time I scrambled up, they were gone. The front door open, cold, air rushing in. I ran through the house, checking every room, every lock, my heart pounding. The kids were asleep, my wife undisturbed, oblivious to the violation. I called the police, my voice shaking as I explained. They found a broken window in the garage, glass scattered across the concrete, but no footprints, no trace of the men. They're ghosts. I loaded the gifts into my car that night, too afraid to leave them in the house, and the next day I had them rewrapped at the mall. That's when I noticed. One gift was missing, the same box the man had tried to steal. He got it anyway. The guilt was worse than the fear. If I'd let him take the box, ignored the theft, they wouldn't have come. My pride, my anger, had brought them to our home, put my family in danger. I did this. I dream of them now. Their faces at the windows, their hands tearing through our lives. I found an old forum post buried online about a pair of thieves who worked Black Friday crowds, targeting families, following them home. No names, no arrests, just stories of broken windows and stolen safety. Is that them? Last Black Friday I stayed home, the doors locked, the cameras on. Late that night my phone buzzed, a motion alert from the backyard camera. I opened the feed, my heart racing, and saw it, a single gift box wrapped in red paper sitting on the patio table. They're back. I didn't go outside, didn't touch it. I burned it in the fireplace, the paper curling into ash, but the fear stayed, a shadow in my chest. They know where we are and they're not done. The theater was a trap, its darkness hiding eyes that watched us, waiting to strike. Alex and I were high school kids, reckless enough to think a late-night movie was an adventure, not a mistake. The theater, tucked inside our local mall, was a relic of better days, its carpets faded, its seats creaking under years of use. That night we'd picked an obscure film, some low-budget thriller that barely drew a crowd. The mall was quiet, its shops shuttered, the only sound the hum of escalators running for no one. Stay close, don't wander, I told myself, a reflex from years of navigating this place after dark. We grabbed our tickets, popcorn, and settled into the middle row. The screen's glow a promise of escape. But as the lights dimmed, I felt it, a prickle on my neck like someone was watching me. The theater was nearly empty, just a handful of shadows scattered across the seats. Alex, slouched beside me, was already lost in the film, his face lit by the flickering screen. I tried to focus, but the air felt wrong, heavy with an unseen weight. Why does it feel like we're not alone? Then I saw them. A couple, late arrivals, slipping into our row, leaving just 2 seats between us. The woman was tall, her hair pulled tight, her movements sharp and deliberate. The man was broader, his face hidden in the dark, but his presence was a wall, solid and unyielding. Why sit so close when the whole theater's empty? I shifted in my seat, uneasy, but Alex didn't notice, his eyes glued to the screen. The movie droned on, but I couldn't focus. The woman kept looking at us, her head turning every few minutes, her eyes catching the screen's light like mirrors. She's not watching the movie, she's watching us. At first I thought I was imagining it, my mind spinning stories from the thriller on screen. But her stares grew bolder, her face fully turned toward us, her expression blank but piercing. I nudged Alex, my voice low. She's staring. He glanced over, his brow furrowing, and nodded. Yeah, I see it too. My stomach twisted, a knot of dread tightening with each glance. She wasn't subtle anymore, her eyes locked on us, unblinking, like a predator sizing up prey. Every now and then, she leaned toward the man, her lips moving, but he never looked our way, his gaze fixed forward, unnaturally still. Nested storytelling. My older brother once told me about a night he went to a concert, standing in a crowd that felt alive until he noticed a guy staring at him, never blinking, even as the music roared. He moved through the crowd, but the guy followed, always just a few steps behind. My brother lost him in the chaos, but he never went to concerts alone again. I laughed it off then, but now, trapped in this theater, I felt that same chill, that sense of being marked. The movie crawled by, each minute stretching into eternity. I wanted to leave, to drag Alex out and run, but he shook his head when I suggested it. It's fine, he said, but his voice was tight. He's scared too, but he won't admit it. Staying felt safer than walking out alone, so I sank lower, in my seat trying to disappear. The woman's stares didn't stop, her eyes boring into us, and I swore I saw her smile once. A thin, cruel curve that vanished when I looked again. When the credits finally rolled, I grabbed Alex's arm. We're leaving, now. We bolted from the theater, the empty halls echoing our footsteps, the mall's fluorescent lights harsh after the dark. I wanted to laugh it off, to tell Alex. We were paranoid, but then I heard it, footsteps behind us, fast and purposeful. We turned, and there they were, the couple moving through the hall, their eyes locked on us. They're following us. My heart slammed against my ribs, and I grabbed Alex's hand, pulling him toward the parking garage. The mall was a ghost town, its silence amplifying every sound. Their shoes on the tile, our breaths ragged. We reached my car, a beat-up black Civic, and I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking. Get in, get out. The engine roared to life, and I peeled out of the garage, the tires screeching on the concrete. Alex twisted in his seat, watching the rear view. They're not there, he said, but his voice was unsteady. I hit the main road, the highway stretching out, empty under the moonlight. We're safe now, aren't we? Then headlights flared behind us, bright and blinding, high beams cutting through the night. My blood froze. A car sped up, tailgating us, its engine a low growl. I glanced at Alex. "Is it blue?" I asked, remembering the couple's car in the garage. He squinted, his face pale. "I can't tell." The light ahead turned green and I swerved left, heading toward our neighborhood, praying they'd go straight. But they turned too, their light steady in my mirror. It's them. It has to be. I slammed the gas, the Civic shaking as I pushed it to its limit. Alex gripped the door, his voice rising. "Gun it!" The car behind us didn't tailgate, but it stayed close, a shadow that wouldn't shake loose. The streets were empty, no other cars to hide behind, and I felt exposed like a deer in a hunter's sights. I turned into our neighborhood, the familiar houses a faint comfort, but I passed Alex's street, afraid to show them where we lived. They're still there, gaining speed. Their headlights grew brighter, closer, and Alex was panicking now, his words tumbling out. "What do we do?" I didn't answer, my mind racing. I turned onto a side street, then another, weaving through the maze of suburbia. Lose them now. On an unfamiliar road, I made a split-second decision. I flipped the car into neutral, killed the engine, and let it roll silently into a parking spot by the curb. Hide. Don't move. I reclined my seat, flattening myself against it, and hissed at Alex to lean forward. We sat there, hearts pounding, the silence deafening, my ears ringing with fear. Seconds later, their car rounded the corner, moving slowly, its headlights sweeping the street. "They're looking for us." I held my breath, every muscle locked, praying my black Civic blended into the row of parked cars. The car crept past, its engine a low hum, and I saw the woman's silhouette in the passenger seat, her head turning, searching. She knows we're here. But they didn't stop. They drove on, their taillights fading into the dark. We stayed there, frozen, for 10 agonizing minutes, afraid they'd circle back. What did they want? The question burned in my mind, unanswered, unanswerable. When we finally sat up, Alex and I stared at each other, our breaths shallow. We didn't speak, didn't need to. The fear was a living thing between us, a shadow we couldn't shake. I drove him home, my hands still trembling, and checked my mirrors the whole way. They're gone, but are they really? I don't go to late-night movies anymore, not unless I'm with a crowd. Every time I pass that theater, I feel those eyes, again watching from the dark, waiting for me to slip. They're out there somewhere, and I'll never know why they chose us. The night was alive with laughter and the hum of the drive-in screen, but the weight of his gun in my hand turned it all to ash. My name is Emily, and I was 15, a sheltered high school girl caught in the thrill of a late-night movie with my friends. We were young, reckless, chasing freedom under the stars, but the man who offered us beer wasn't just a stranger. He was a shadow, his smile hiding something sharp and cold. His name was David, and when I found the gun under his car seat, I knew we were no longer safe. This is the story of how one night taught me fear, how the music drowned out my screams, and how I fought to keep us from vanishing into the dark. It was a warm summer night, the kind where the air clung to your skin, heavy with the scent of popcorn and gasoline. The drive-in theater was our escape, a relic of a bygone era where cars parked in neat rows, their windows framing flickering screens. Erin had convinced us, me, Kareen, Erica, and Sarah, to pile into her beat-up SUV for a double feature, 2 movies that promised thrills and laughter until the early hours. We were giddy, our voices loud as we spread blankets in the back, tossing pillows and snacks into a chaotic nest. The stars glittered above, the screen glowing with previews, and for a moment I felt invincible. A teenager stealing a slice of freedom from the world. Erin was the planner, her confidence infectious, her laughter a spark that lit us all. Karina was the flirt, her eyes bright with mischief, always chasing the next thrill. Erica was quieter, her sarcasm sharp but kind, while Sarah was the dreamer, lost in her own world. I was the cautious one, the girl who checked the locks twice, who hesitated before jumping. But that night I let myself go, caught in the current of their excitement. We parked near the screen, the SUV's tailgate open, the speakers crackling with sound. As we settled in, Erin's eyes caught someone in the crowd, a man, alone, leaning against a sedan a few rows over. "That's David," she said, her voice casual. "He works at my gym." I glanced over, seeing a man in his mid-20s, his hair dark, his posture relaxed but oddly deliberate. He waved and Erin waved back, but something in his smile made my stomach twist, a flicker of unease I couldn't name. David approached, his steps slow, his eyes scanning us like he was memorizing our faces. He was charming, his voice smooth, offering compliments that made Karine giggle. "You girls look like you know how to have fun," he said, and I forced a smile, my hands fidgeting in my lap. When he offered us beer, pulling cans from a cooler in his car, my unease grew. But Karine's eyes lit up and Erin shrugged, saying, "Why not?" I wanted to protest, to remind them we were underage, that he was a stranger, but their laughter drowned me out. I took a can, the metal cold against my palm, but I didn't drink. My eyes fixed on David, his gaze lingering too long, too intense. Why is he here alone? The question gnawed at me, a quiet hum beneath the movie's dialogue, the night's warmth turning oppressive. The first movie started, its colors splashing across the screen, but I couldn't focus. David had joined us, squeezing into Erin's SUV, his presence a weight in the cramped space. Karine was all over him, her laughter loud, her hands brushing his arm. I sat near the edge, my knees drawn up, the beer untouched in my hand. The air was thick, the scent of sweat and alcohol mixing with the night's heat, and I felt trapped, my skin prickling with a warning I couldn't voice. "Get out," a voice whispered in my mind. But I stayed, tethered by my friends' carefree chatter, their trust in Erin's vague acquaintance. David suggested we split up, saying his car had a better view, and I jumped at the chance to escape, leading Erica and Sarah to his sedan, leaving Karine with him. It was a mistake, one that would haunt me. His car was small, the seats worn, the air stale with cigarette smoke. I took the driver's seat, the steering wheel pressing against my chest, the screen distant through the windshield. The movie played, but my eyes wandered, my unease growing. My phone slipped from my lap, sliding under the seat, and I reached down, my fingers brushing something cold heavy. I pulled it out, my breath catching. A gun, its metal gleaming faintly, its weight real, undeniable. A gun. My heart pounded, my hands trembling as I held it, the movie sound fading to a dull roar. Why does he have this? I showed Erica and Sarah, my voice low, urgent, but they downplayed it, their eyes nervous but dismissive. "It's probably fake," Erica said, but her voice wavered. "Put it back," Sarah whispered. And I did, sliding it under the seat, my fingers lingering, my mind racing. What does he want? The movies dragged on, the beer loosening my friend's laughter, but I was sober, hyper-aware, every glance at David's car a stab of fear. Karine's giggles drifted through the night, her silhouette close to his, and I felt sick, the gun's weight a ghost in my hands. When the second movie ended, I was ready to leave, my body tense, my eyes scanning the lot. But as I stepped out, I saw Aaron's SUV pulling away. Kareen's voice calling out, cheerful, oblivious. "David's driving us home," she said, and my stomach dropped. No. I had no choice, no way to get home without them. So I climbed into David's car, my heart a drumbeat, my friends piling in, unaware of the danger I'd touched. David took the driver's seat, Kareen beside him, her Justin Bieber playlist blaring through the speakers, a jarring contrast to the knot in my chest. I sat behind him, my eyes fixed on his reflection in the rearview mirror, his smile too wide, too practiced. Erica gave directions, to her house, but David's hands tightened on the wheel, his voice casual but edged. "Got time for a quick drive to the reservoir?" he asked, and my blood ran cold. The reservoir was isolated, a dark expanse of woods and water miles from town, a place where screams wouldn't carry. "He's taking us there." The thought was a scream in my mind, a command to act, but Kareen laughed, singing along, and Erica hesitated, her voice soft. "It's late," I said, my words sharp, but David turned up the music, drowning me out, the car veering toward the long, dark road to the reservoir. Panic surged, a tidal wave crashing through me. "He can't take us there." The gun flashed in my mind, its weight, its threat, real or not, a promise of what could happen in the dark. Kareen's music was a mockery, her voice carefree. But I saw David's eyes in the mirror, glinting, focused, a predator guiding us to his trap. I tried again, louder. "We need to go home." But he ignored me, the music swelling, the road stretching into nowhere. My friends were silent, their laughter gone, but they didn't act, didn't see what I saw. "Do something." The command was a pulse, urgent, undeniable. I leaned forward, my hands shaking, and kicked the back of his seat, hard, my voice breaking as I shouted, "Turn around now." He glanced back, his smile faltering, but I didn't stop. Kicking again, my screams tearing through the music, my window rolled down, my voice spilling into the night, a desperate plea for someone, anyone, to hear. He scoffed, his voice mocking, "Fine," as if I was overreacting. But he turned the car, the tires crunching on gravel, the reservoir fading behind us. My heart pounded, my breath ragged, but relief was fleeting, tainted by the gun, by his eyes, by the knowledge that we'd come too close. We reached Erica's house and I ran out, my legs trembling, my friends following, their faces pale. We woke Erica's parents, their voices sharp as I told them everything. The beer, the gun, the drive. They called the police, but David was gone, his car a memory in the dark. I didn't sleep that night, my mind replaying his smile, the gun's weight, the road to nowhere. My friendship with Kareen cracked, her recklessness a wound I couldn't forgive, her laughter a reminder of how close we'd come to disappearing. I see him in my dreams, his eyes in the mirror, the gun waiting under the seat. He's out there, a thought that anchors itself in my bones, a fear that no music can drown, a shadow that follows me still. The theater's hum was a distant pulse, but the silence in the bathroom was louder, sharper, like a held breath that promised something was already waiting. I'd slipped out just after the trailers, the IMAX screen's colors still dancing. In my eyes, to hit the bathroom before the movie's 2.5-hour runtime challenged my limits. I'd downed a large hot chocolate, its sweetness clinging to my throat, and I wasn't about to fidget through the opening scenes. The lobby was alive with voices, the crowd buzzing with anticipation, but as I pushed through the heavy restroom door, the world fell silent. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, casting a sterile glow over the white tiles, the air sharp with bleach, stinging my nose. Every stall door hung open, the space deserted, as if I'd stepped into a forgotten corner of reality. Why does this feel wrong? I chose the first urinal near the sink, closest to the exit. A habit born from years of avoiding lingering in public restrooms. The tiles were cold under my sneakers. The distant hum of the theater's projectors a faint reminder of the world outside. The mirror above the sinks reflected my face. Tired, shadowed, a man just trying to get through a night out. I was halfway done when the air shifted, growing heavier like a storm gathering in the room. My skin prickled, my heart giving a small, unsteady lurch. Someone's here. No footsteps, no creak of the door, but a figure appeared at the farthest urinal, maybe 15 feet away. He was tall, lean, dressed in a black jacket, jeans and sneakers. Ordinary, forgettable. So why am I scared? I kept my eyes on the tiles, my pulse quickening, a drumbeat in my chest. The man didn't move, didn't make a sound, but his presence was a weight pressing against me like a shadow cast by something larger. I finished, stepping back, my hands unsteady as I adjusted my jacket. I risked a glance, just a flicker, and caught his eyes. Locked on me, unblinking, his face shrouded in darkness despite the bright lights overhead. That's not possible. The ceiling was lined with fluorescent tubes, no corners for shadows to hide. Yet his face was blurred, a smudge where features should be. His hair was short, parted neatly, his posture relaxed, but those eyes, black, bottomless, felt like they were peeling away my skin, layer by layer. He's not human. I forced a laugh, nervous and hollow, the sound echoing off the tiles. I moved to the sink, keeping him in the corner of my vision, my hands shaking as I turned on the faucet. The water was ice cold, shocking my fingers, but I barely felt it. Just wash and go. I glanced at the mirror, checking for stray crumbs, and when I looked back, he was gone. Where is he? My heart skipped, my eyes darting to the urinals, the stalls, the door. Nothing. But then I saw him, in the mirror, standing at the exit, his body blocking the door, his face still hidden in that impossible shadow. He's trapping me, my breath caught, my hands gripping the sink, the porcelain slick under my palms. The alarms in my head were screaming now, a chorus of panic I couldn't silence. I turned, facing him, my voice trembling. What do you want? No answer. Just that stare, his eyes like voids pulling me in. He's not here to talk. I wanted to shove past, to run, but something held me back, a primal instinct, a whisper that touching him would be like brushing against death itself. Instead, I did something desperate, foolish. I pulled out my phone, my fingers fumbling, and snapped a photo, the flash blinding in the sterile light. If he moves, I'll have proof. He didn't flinch, didn't react, just stood there, his shadowed, face unchanging. I lowered the phone, my breath shallow, and glanced at the screen. What is that? The image wasn't him. The background was black, a void swallowing everything. And in the center floated a face, bone white, gleaming like polished ivory, with no nose. Just 3 gaping holes where eyes and mouth should be. The eyes were pools of liquid black, leaking, down to join a mouth that stretched, drooping, a maw of endless darkness. That's not a face. My hands shook, the phone nearly slipping from my grip. I looked up, and he was still there, unchanged, his shadowed gaze fixed on me. He knows what I saw. I bolted for the middle stall, my usual choice in saner moments, and locked the door, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. I crouched on the toilet, my knees pressed to my chest, the cold porcelain biting into my skin. He can't get in. The lights flickered, then died, plunging the room into darkness so complete it felt solid, pressing against my eyes. He's doing this. A sound rose, faint at first, a rasping breath, uneven and ancient, like something long dead stirring in its grave. He's coming. My breath hitched, my body rigid, every nerve screaming. The sound moved closer now, circling the stalls. Then came a violent crash, deafening in the silence. Porcelain shattering, water splashing across the tiles. He's breaking them. Another crash closer, the stall to my right, the sound of destruction reverberating in my skull. I whimpered, my hands over my mouth, tears stinging my eyes. He's coming for me. The door to my stall shook, a force slamming against it, the lock rattling in its frame. He's here. The metal groaned, bending under the assault but held, a miracle I didn't question. The attack stopped, sudden and jarring, the rasping breath fading, replaced by silence. I stayed there, frozen, counting seconds, minutes, praying, for light, for safety. Is he gone? The fluorescence buzzed back to life, harsh and blinding. I waited, my body trembling, listening for any sign of him. Nothing. I unlocked the door, my hand slick with sweat, and peered out. The floor was a mess of water and shattered porcelain, the other stalls destroyed, their doors hanging limp. He did this. But he was gone. No shadowed man, no white-faced horror, just the wreckage of a nightmare. A man walked in, middle-aged, normal, his eyes widening at the chaos. Man, that chili cheese dog's tearing me up too, he said, chuckling, oblivious to the terror in my face. He doesn't know. I stumbled out, my legs weak, and left the theater, the movie forgotten. I drove home, the image on my phone burning in my mind. I deleted it, but it didn't help. I still see it. The face followed me, haunting my dreams. Those black eyes leaking into the night, that mouth stretching wider, whispering my name. I couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't gone, that he'd marked me, claimed me. He's still watching. The days after were a haze. I avoided mirrors, kept the lights on at night, jumped at every shadow. The theater felt like a trap now, a place where reality had cracked, letting something else slip through. I told a friend, expecting him to laugh, but he didn't. He'd heard stories, whispers about that theater, about a figure seen in the bathrooms, always at night, always in the mirrors. No one knew what it was, only that those who saw it changed, grew quiet, haunted. Is that him? I searched online, digging through forums and local legends. One post, buried in an archive, chilled me. A janitor's account from years ago claiming he'd found the bathroom wrecked, mirrors cracked, and a strange photo on his phone. A white face with black holes. He quit the next day. It's the same. I tried to move on, to bury the fear, but it clung to me. A shadow I couldn't shake. I stopped going to movies, avoided public restrooms, checked my phone obsessively for photos I didn't take. My life shrank, the world smaller, darker. He's still out there. I started noticing things. Small, subtle signs that kept me awake. A flicker in the bathroom mirror at home, gone when I turned. A cold spot in the hallway, like a breath on my neck. Once I woke to find my phone on the nightstand, its camera open, the screen black. He's closer now. Last week I was cleaning out my phone's storage, deleting old apps, when I froze. A photo I didn't remember taking. A dark frame with a faint white shape in the center, its eyes black and endless, its mouth a drooping void. He's here. My hands shook, my breath shallow, as I stared at the screen. The face seemed to move, its eyes shifting, locking onto mine. I smashed the phone, the glass splintering under my heel, but the image stayed, burned into my mind. I burned the pieces in the backyard, the plastic melting into ash, but it didn't help. He's not gone. I don't sleep much anymore. The mirrors in my house are covered, the light's always on, but the darkness finds me. I hear him sometimes, a rasping breath in the quiet, a faint tap on the glass. He's waiting. I don't know what he is, a ghost, a demon, something older, something that doesn't belong. I don't know why he chose me or what he wants, but I know he's not finished. Every shadow, every flicker of light, is him. He's coming back, and I'm running out of places to hide. The warmth of Thanksgiving was a fragile illusion, concealing a darkness that slithered through my home. The dining room was a haven of light, candles flickering on the table, their glow dancing across plates piled with turkey, stuffing, and cranberry sauce. The air was heavy with the scent of rosemary and butter, mingling with the laughter of children and the clink of glasses. My wife and I had no family to call our own anymore, our ties severed by old wounds and bitter words. So, we filled our holidays with the friends of our children, Jackson, our 16-year-old son, and Sydney, our 14-year-old daughter. This year, Jackson brought 3 boys from school, their voices loud and jagged, cutting through the warmth like a cold draft. Sydney's 4 friends were softer, their giggles floating from the living room, a delicate counterpoint to the boys' chaos. Marcus, our only friend, sat across from me, his weathered face creased with a smile as he shuffled the deck of cards between us. Keep the kids in sight, I told myself, a father's instinct that hummed beneath the surface, even in this moment of joy. But the house was alive with noise, a symphony of youth, and I let myself believe we were safe, that this night was sacred. Jackson was a whirlwind, tall and wiry, his eyes bright with mischief. He'd always been the one to push boundaries, sneaking out at night or charming his way out of trouble. Sydney was his opposite, quiet and introspective, her world a private one, guarded behind the chaos of her bedroom. The kids had claimed their territories after dinner, the boys storming upstairs to Jackson's room, their footsteps shaking the ceiling, the girls sprawling across the living room couches with my wife, the TV droning with some romantic comedy. Marcus and I stayed at the table, the cards a familiar ritual, the coffee bitter and warm in our cups. The house felt overstuffed, its walls straining to hold so many lives, so many secrets. Why does it feel like the air is watching us? I glanced toward the living room, where the girls were lost in their movie, their faces bathed in blue light. The staircase loomed behind them, a dark spine twisting up to the second floor, and I saw him, a boy at the top, half hidden in shadow, his face lit by the glow of his phone. It was one of Jackson's friends, sitting cross-legged, his eyes darting between the screen and the room below. What's he doing there? I watched him, expecting him to move, to join the others, but he stayed, his posture rigid, like a guard at a gate. Minutes later, another boy took his place, the swap so seamless. I almost doubted my eyes. They're taking turns watching us. The realization settled in my gut like a stone, cold and heavy. I set my cards down, my hands steady but my heart racing. Marcus looked up, his brow furrowed, but I waved him off, my gaze locked on the stairs. The new boy was doing the same, watching, waiting, his fingers tapping the phone, its screen a faint beacon in the dark. Something's wrong, terribly wrong. I stood, my chair scraping the floor, the sound cutting through the room's warmth like a blade. The girls glanced over, curious, but I was already moving, my footsteps deliberate as I reached the base of the stairs. The boy at the top looked up, his face flushing red, his eyes wide with panic. He fumbled with his phone, tucking it against his side. But I saw the screen. A call, the timer ticking, seconds stretching into minutes. Who's he talking to? Why? I climbed the first step, my voice calm but edged with steel. "What are you doing up there?" He stammered, his words a jumble of denials, his hands shaking as he tried to stand. I pressed him, my tone sharper, my patience thinning. "Why are you and your friends taking shifts?" He blocked my path, his body tense, his lies crumbling under my stare. He's hiding something and he's scared I'll find it. I teased him, hoping to crack his facade, suggesting they were sneaking peeks at the girls' movie, their chick flick. The living room went quiet, the girl's eyes on us, and the boy's face burned brighter, his voice rising in protest. I pushed past him, my shoulder brushing his, my footsteps heavy on the stairs, a father's rage simmering, ready to boil. Nested storytelling. Years ago, my sister told me about a sleepover she hosted for her daughter's friends. She woke to find one of the boys in her daughter's room, his hands in her dresser, his face pale when she caught him. He said he was looking for a toy, but the lie was thin, his eyes too guilty. She sent him home, but the violation lingered, a crack in her trust that never healed. I dismissed it then, thought she was overreacting, but now, standing in my own house, I felt that same poison, a betrayal seeping through the walls, tainting the air. Jackson's room was at the end of the hall, its door closed, the light seeping out in a thin, accusing line. I didn't knock, just shoved it open, the air inside thick with the stench of sweat, energy drinks, and something sourer, something wrong. Jackson and one friend jumped, their faces guilty, their eyes darting to the floor. "Where's the third?" I scanned the room, empty soda cans, a tangled mess of chargers, a TV paused on a violent game, but the third boy was gone. "Where is he?" I demanded, my voice low, dangerous. They shrugged, their lies flimsy. Bathroom maybe, or downstairs. They're covering for him. I stormed to the bathroom, yanking the shower curtain aside, checking the cabinet under the sink. My pulse a hammer in my chest. Nothing. He's somewhere he shouldn't be. Doing something he shouldn't. I moved to Sydney's room, the door ajar, the chaos inside a familiar sight. Clothes strewn across the floor, makeup cluttering, the desk. A mirror smudged with fingerprints, cups half filled with water scattered like forgotten promises. But the air was different, heavier, the mess deliberate in a way it hadn't been before. Every drawer gaped open, the bins under the bed pulled out, the closet door shut tight. Sydney never closes that door. My breath caught, my hand trembling, as I gripped the handle. What's behind it? What have they done? I yanked it open, and there he was, the missing boy buried in a pile of clothes, his eyes wide with terror, his hands raised like a shield. I grabbed him, dragging him into the light, his stammered excuses drowned out by the roar in my ears. "What were you doing in my daughter's room?" I hauled him downstairs, the others trailing behind, their faces pale, their guilt a stench that clung to them. In the living room, I shut off the TV, the silence a guillotine, and made them sit, their shoulders hunched, their eyes darting like trapped animals. "Tell me everything. Now." My wife and the girls watched, their faces a mix of confusion and fear, Sydney's eyes narrowing as she sensed the weight of the moment. It took hours, their confessions pried out through tears, shouts, and threats to call the police. They'd planned it. A sick game born in whispers, each taking turns to watch. The stairs, alerting the others if anyone came up. One would slip into Sydney's room, defiling it with acts too vile to name, recording their shame on their phones, a trophy to share later, a monument to their betrayal. They touched her things, her private world, and laughed about it. The worst, Was Jackson, my own son, the leader? His face crumpling as he confessed, his voice breaking under the weight of his shame. How could you? Sydney's scream cut through the room, raw and jagged, her hands shaking as she fled, her friends chasing after her, their sobs echoing in the night. My wife followed, her face pale, her eyes filled with a pain I couldn't touch. They broke her, broke us. Marcus and I stayed with the boys, my hands itching to do more than shout, but I held back, forcing them to send their videos to their parents, a digital confession to seal their fate. The parents arrived, their faces a blur of shock and anger, their voices muted as they dragged their sons away. Jackson, I banished to Marcus's garage, a punishment that felt too small for the wound he'd inflicted. He's no son of mine, not anymore. Sydney hasn't been the same since, her laughter gone, her room now bare, as if she could strip away the violation. She locks her door at night, her eyes haunted, her trust shattered. My wife moves through the house like a ghost, her silence a wall between us. I check the locks every night, not for strangers, but for the darkness we let in ourselves. Every shadow feels like a reminder, every stare a warning of what we lost. I see Jackson's face in my dreams, not the boy I raised, but the stranger who betrayed us. His eyes empty, his hands stained. How do you forgive your own blood? The house is quieter now, its warmth a lie I can't believe anymore. And I wonder if we'll ever find our way back.